This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Commemorating the 10th anniversary of the greatest comic book movie of all time, the Hard-Traveling Fanboys celebrate Dark Knight Month.
Coming to you live from the Ho-Ho Loon Plaza in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Inside the L-shaped studio, it's the Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Well,
I'm the host.
We have had numerous celebrity guests over our years now doing this show. What about Love in the Time of Cholera? How about that?
I like Love in the Time of Dysentery myself.
Oh, well, now I've heard. Never mind. Let's leave that off these airwaves.
The esteemed Duke is here with me. We are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, and I am here to bring you the conclusion of the much ballyhooed Dark Knight month here at the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. That's right, we are wrapping up our celebration of Christopher Nolan's historic Batman trilogy, the second film of which turned 10 years old this month. And we are closing things out with an episode of Countdown. Now, as you may have heard, Countdown, stay with me here, is an episode in which we count down our favorite or least favorite things in a certain genre related to comic books. In this case, we are counting down our top 5 favorite scenes of the Dark Knight trilogy. That's right. Over the last 3 episodes, you guys have had a chance to hear us talk about the glory and the splendor of Batman Begins, the new heights of the Dark Knight, the emotional resonance of the Dark Knight Rises, and now we've whittled it down. We have whittled it down to our 5 favorite scenes. But we didn't do it alone. No, for such an occasion, we wanted to close out with yet another guest this month in the studio. And today, live via satellite, we have my neighbor and the host of the Sunday Groove / Easy Like David Sunday. Ladies and gentlemen, Fred Smith. Sorry, David Sunday. David, how are you?
Hello, and welcome to the Not Sunday Groove.
Well, there that was.
It is certainly not a Sunday.
No.
But you know what, David? If you want this to be a groove, it can be, because one thing that I've learned from the ongoing Greatest Song of the 80s tournament at Place to Be Nation is that groove is in the heart.
Or house, as I used to think.
Yes, not groove is in the house.
Greg, probably 50 years from now, the NCAA basketball tournament might be half as long as the Greatest Song of the 80s tournament, at least in terms of number of entrants, because, man, Jesus Christ, how many songs are in this thing? I don't even know.
So many songs that we put in a little-known cover version of a Prince song without putting the Prince song in it. But that's neither here nor there. That's inside baseball. Now, what's going to
Let me tell you the bone while we're on the topic, let me tell you the bone I have to pick with the Greatest Song of the 80s tournament. You mean to tell me all these songs in the 80s, and I think the only country song I've seen on there is freaking 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, which is a fine song. It's a fine song, don't get me wrong. But come on, people.
I was fighting an uphill battle. I was the only country aficionado on the selection committee, and so I was able to get Guitars and Cadillacs by Dwight Yoakam.
That's true. That was on there.
and I was able to get a George Strait song or two that haven't appeared yet. But it was an uphill
now,
battle.
See, that is once again Place to Be Nation showing its northeastern bias.
Northeastern bias, yep. Now, what do you think will end first, Nick? The 80s tournament or the Seinfeld rewatch?
The Seinfeld rewatch will never end. I mean, because as we all know, it's such a good show that whenever you do a rewatch and a long-form rewatch project writing about it, once you reach the end, you just start again, because you might find some new angles to come at it from.
That's a good point. Regardless, we encourage all of you to go out and vote in the greatest song in the 80s tournament. Vote early, vote often. Clear your cookies from your browser and vote again. And then make sure you vote for songs that I like, such as Billy Squires' The Stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommended.
I voted for that today.
Very good,
or
David.
yesterday.
David's a man that understands music, a man that understands nuance, the nuance of a man writing a song about stroking.
And of course, we here at the Place to Be Nation Comics contingent, the Place to Be Nation Comics family, we are officially endorsing any and all Steve Winwood songs for advancement in this tournament for reasons that we will keep undisclosed.
To ourselves.
Yes.
Bring me a higher love, Nick. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to higher love, David, you haven't been on the show this month to talk about Dark Knight Month, but we have been talking about our higher love of the Dark Knight trilogy. So just take a moment here before we get started in our countdown to summarize very briefly your thoughts about the Dark Knight trilogy. In other words, just roll with it, baby.
It's one of those things that gets better with like every watch of them. Like Batman Begins, I wouldn't have put it down, but like I didn't fully appreciate it until recent years. Like Dark Knight, always have been in love with that movie. Thought it was incredible. But Batman Begins, I guess it took several watches for me to really fully appreciate it and fall in love with it. And now, I don't know, like just what Nolan did with it, the guts that he had to take it in such a different direction, and I don't know, just everything he did with it. It just makes me so excited, especially when you get into Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. It's just beautiful, beautiful films.
Absolutely. And with all that being said, I can think of no better transition to get us into our countdown this month. And we like to start from the top and work our way down, hence count down and not count up. Although that's not a bad idea for a show. Someone should do that. I am going to flip it over to you, Nicholas, and let you start us out with your number 5 selection.
Well,
for the best scenes in the Dark Knight trilogy.
Absolutely. And there's no better place to start this countdown than at the end of the trilogy. And while it's not the exact ending, not the a scene that I think Greg's going to talk about here in a little bit, I think for my number 5, I'm going to go with the climactic action sequence from The Dark Knight Rises. This is, of course, the chase, the race to get the nuclear bomb out of Gotham City before it explodes. And it's in this moment that we are starting to see the true dedication of Bruce Wayne to his cause, as he is, come back after all the pain and hardships he's had to endure over what is roughly a year, I think we determined that the film takes place over. He's come back to Gotham to save his people. He is putting it all out there on the line. And he is willing, seemingly, to make the ultimate sacrifice. We are seeing him preparing to lay down his life in service of his city, but not before we get what is probably my favorite, 15-second long exchange in the entire trilogy when Gordon is trying to stop him from flying off with the bomb in the bat. And Gordon says, don't the people deserve to know who saved them? And that's when, Bruce says something to the effect of, anybody can be a hero, even someone doing something as simple as putting a coat around a young boy's shoulders to let it know the world hadn't ended. And it brings back that exchange from Batman Begins in such a huge way. It lands an emotional impact with me because of my love for the Batman and Gordon dynamic. And it all takes place within a pretty, tension-filled chase scene that's pretty well done. That outside of the unfortunate Talia al Ghul death is one of the better action sequences in the trilogy. So for the Gordon stuff, for the seemingly selfless sacrifice of Bruce Wayne, and for the way the chase scene itself is laid out, I'm going with that as my number 5 selection.
Very nice, and a little outside maybe outside the ordinary pick. I knew it would land on your list because of, in particular, the Gordon and Batman scene. But a great action sequence, one of the best action sequences in the entire trilogy, I think. Now, what do you think contained more heat inside it, that nuclear bomb or Ricky and Robert versus the Midnights and the Omni?
I think it'd have to be Ricky and Robert, because you got to remember, the only person that deserves to be put next to Ricky and Robert is, of course, our Lord Jesus Christ.
True. That's true. This was a great scene that really I think represented Nolan's escalating action throughout the three movies. Rises has the most action set pieces in it, and it really pays off in a big way here. And you get that emotional moment with Gordon and Batman, the moment of Gordon realizing Batman's true identity, or at least admitting to himself that he knows his true identity. A lot of stuff to love there. David, any memories of that scene?
Oh, it's incredible. It's, as Nick says, such a wonderful callback to it, and got a lot of emotional payoff.
Almost an emotional payback, but that would be a Mel Gibson movie, and we're not counting those down right now. We should at some point. So, David, with that being said, what is your number 5 selection?
Man, this list was incredibly hard, but I finally got it down to and I'm bad at setting this up, but it's in Dark Knight Rises. It's the fight when Batman and Catwoman first fight together after she confronts Daggett. Yes.
Yeah.
Like it just came off the heels of such a great scene of her intimidating him with the heel of her high heel boots, I guess, or whatever, stiletto type things, whatever. And then just a really cool fight scene. Him not letting her kill anybody, just working together. Really, really good fight scene. Like just the camera spans back. I don't know. It's just really a breathtaking fight scene, and I loved it just seeing them together.
Chemistry.
Yes, the chemistry and all. It was great.
Yeah. That's what I think I mentioned it last week on the show that was a scene that really stood out to me. The little touch of him not letting her kill anybody, which is a nice evolution of Bruce and showing that he was not willing to cross that line, and he hadn't given in to that darkness in himself, basically. And you also get that dynamic chemistry between Bale and Hathaway, which I think really surprised a lot of us the first time we saw the movie.
Yeah, I'm shocked how much she puts into this role, because so many people phone in superhero performances. So to see
Natalie Portman.
an actress, yes, but to see an actress of her caliber that seems to prefer indie films, it's really great that she put her all into this.
100%. Nick, any thoughts on that scene?
Oh, it's an outstanding scene. It was one that was, I think I had a list of like 25 scenes that I jotted down to pick 5 from, and it was on my preliminary list. So I'm of course a big fan of that scene as well. Just couldn't find a spot for it on my top 5.
Well, I will now use that as a chance to transition into my number 5 selection, which comes to us from the motion picture The Dark Knight. You may have heard of this one. This is the scene that is in the hospital, and it takes place between the Joker and a freshly scarred Harvey Dent, who awakens from unconsciousness, and essentially this scene is all about manipulation. This is all about the Joker manipulating Harvey Dent to get the end result that he wants, the chaos that he wants. He gives him this extremely, seemingly improv speech about chaos and disorder and not really having a plan, and yet the whole time I think it's clear that he does have a plan, and that this is his plan, and everything is going as he wants it to go, and the breaking of Harvey Dent is the next step in his plan, and that's all he wants, is to destroy Gotham's White Knight and send a message to Batman. And to me, everything about this scene works. The anger from Aaron Eckhart, you feel the rage from him to the point that it's almost frightening to watch when he tries to break the bonds on his hospital chair, and the Joker is so calm and so almost in his own world that he doesn't really care what Harvey does. And of course, Ledger just destroys this scene as a performer with the way that he captures that delicate balance of unhinged, funny, because the Joker is very funny. Remember, he's dressed up like a nurse in this scene, which is hilarious just as a visual. And then his whole, like, hi, and just the way that he talks to Harvey in this scene is funny, but yet there's this underlying genius behind the madness that he's playing with every emotion that Harvey has, and he really plays him like a fiddle and gets Harvey, pushed over this edge to go in a direction that's going to ultimately benefit what the Joker wants, which is to disrupt Gotham City, to disrupt the normal people, if you will, these civilized people. So I think it's one of the great scenes ever in a movie to me, which is amazing that it's only number 5 on my list, but definitely had to get it on there.
Yeah, this was my biggest regret. If this had been a top 7, there would have been 2 Two-Face scenes at the back end of it, but I wound up having to cut both of them just because I love the other stuff on my list so much. But I love this scene so much. You know that, Greg, because of my massive attachment to Harvey Dent and Two-Face as a character. And in a film that is just filled with fantastic Joker scenes, this is one of the best. So big props for this scene as well. I'm bummed I couldn't make it have a spot on my list.
Very good. David, any thoughts?
None that y'all haven't already said. It's an incredible scene.
Excellent. So, Nick, why don't you hit us with your number 4 selection here?
So my number 5 selection was a chase...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Was a chase sequence from The Dark Knight Rises. And here for number 4, I'm going to go with a chase sequence from The Dark Knight. I don't know what else to call it, but I'm going to call it the truck flip and bat pod scene from The Dark Knight. Because when you think of iconic moments from that movie, that 18-wheeler that the Joker is driving with slaughter is the best medicine spray painted on the side, literally flipping up and, doing a complete 180 in the streets of Chicago is one of the most iconic images from any movie in my lifetime that I can remember. It's a special effect that is done practically with wires and hydraulics and all kinds of other convoluted ways of actually physically flipping an 18-wheeler in the middle of Chicago that Chris Nolan was able to pull off because of his dedication to doing things practically whenever possible. So you have that fantastic visual, but leading up to it, you've also got just a dynamic chase sequence where you have Harvey Dent in the back of this police wagon, and the Joker is trying to chase him down, and of course Batman leaps into action, at first with the tumbler, but then when the tumbler takes heavy damage from a rocket launcher that was fired by the Joker, we get the reveal of the Batpod. And we knew that the Batpod was in the movie because of various trailers and posters and whatnot, but we didn't know exactly how. And so when we get that shot of the tumbler like self-destructing and the Batpod emerging from what's left behind, it's one of the coolest damn things in that entire movie. And of course, you can't talk about this scene without talking about arguably the best character moment in it when the Joker is standing in the middle of the street as the Batpod is racing towards him and just saying, come on, hit me, I want you to do it. And of course Batman, who you can see in his face so desperately wants to, can't do it, and he has to put the bike down and take a tumble, which of course leads to the Joker's arrest at the hands of a revealed to not be dead Jim Gordon. So just everything that's going on in this scene, it could have just been a mindless action scene, but everything in it adds something to the plot and drives the story forward. Whether it's Joker character dynamics, whether it's the reveal of Gordon's plan, whether it's, Harvey being revealed to have known he was never actually going to jail. Just everything about this scene adds so much to the plot and of course sets up the next big chess move for the Joker. So, Dark Knight, I've made no secret, it's my favorite movie of all time, and this is my favorite action sequence in my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, there's not much else I can add to that. It's a great scene from beginning to end. Come on, I want you to do it. That whole thing, amazing. The Batpod, sir. Open up the Batpod. Good stuff there. David, this one might end up on your list. I know this is one of your favorite scenes.
It It may. It's hard to say.
All right. Well, I won't make you spoil any of your thoughts on it. So let's move on to your number 4 selection.
Okay. My number 4 is at the very beginning of The Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. That bank heist. That is still one of the tensest, most impressive beginnings to a movie that, I mean, I didn't know much about it going into it. I know Nick and you have talked about it on other episodes about how y'all had the, I don't know, all the anticipations and everything for the movie. And I did, but I didn't keep up with it quite like y'all did. So, I mean, I don't know, it just really came out of left field. It was so cool, just the tenseness of not knowing who was going to die next and just watching, everybody just take the next person out after they do their job. But, like, just the first glimpse of the Joker, even though I guess you kind of know it's the Joker, but you don't know 100% sure that it is, because he's blending in as with just one of the lackeys. Mm-hmm. Just his swagger, just the way he moves around, gives off his weird, crazy confidence and quirkiness just early on in it. And I don't know, I love it. I mean, like, even to the point of falling down to the ground when he's shooting and just stuff like that. It's just very impressive and just let me know that this is going to be such a different movie. Like, Batman Begins was different, but this is going to continue even more intense and just more impressive.
It's one of the things that we don't think about a lot we talk about these performances when Nick and I do our podcast. We don't think about the physicality of acting as much as we do the delivery of the lines, I think. Mm-hmm. And the physicality is a major aspect. And you're right. The physical transformation that Ledger goes through as the Joker is evident from that very first scene. The minute he walks on camera, as you put it, the way he walks, the way his body movement, everything is... It's not Heath Ledger, it's the Joker. It's this immediately charismatic, interesting character that you want to follow the rest of the movie.
Even before he pulls off his mask and reveals who he is, when he shoots the bank manager and kind of gives that, like, quizzical dog cocking his head to the side look, like, that's one of the best aspects of it. This scene, another one that I wanted to find a spot on my list. If I had done a top 10 instead of a top 5, it definitely would have been on there. I remember, we talked about in the Dark Knight show that this screened in front of IMAX showings of I Am Legend, back in December prior to the movie's opening in July. So a full 7 months before. And I remember when it leaked online, a shitty cam-held version, I downloaded it and added it to my Xbox 360 hard drive just so I could watch it on my television over and over and over again in the months leading up to the movie's release. So I had actually seen this scene probably 30 or 35 times before the movie ever came out, and yet it still had the same impact on me because I was seeing it for the first time on a screen in high definition and not a shitty cam version. And so, yeah, I love this scene so much. It's one of my most vivid memories of seeing of the whole build to this movie.
Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about it, the other part of him, I think I asked him, how many shots, does he have any shots left?
Yeah.
And him just like doing the little careless shrug. Beautiful. So funny. Just, I think that's when I started to sense this guy's probably definitely got to be the Joker, even though he's blended in. Because like I said, kind of had my suspicions, I think, even the first time, but that was definitely starting to give away. This guy's a little different.
Mm-hmm. and just the elaborate scheme of everybody taking out everybody and, culminating the way it did was terrific. Well, in my number 4 scene, I'm going to go to The Dark Knight Rises for the first of what will be multiple times. And I'm going to go to a scene in The Dark Knight Rises that, as I've talked about this trilogy, if Batman Begins was about building the character up and The Dark Knight was about appealing to my head, The Dark Knight Rises was about appealing to my heart and pulling at my emotions. And I have one of the scenes in the film and one of the scenes in the trilogy that tugged at my emotions like few others. And that would be a scene in Wayne Manor between Bruce Wayne and Alfred. And it takes place on a staircase. And this is the scene in which Bruce is determined to go off and try to fight Bane, try to make a stand again as Batman, or Batman, if you will. And Alfred believes this to be a fool's errand. He believes it's a suicide mission. And all he wants is for his son, who he views as his surrogate son, Bruce Wayne, He just wants him to be happy and healthy, and he's no longer going to enable him. And Alfred makes the tough decision to tell Bruce the truth about the note that Rachel left in The Dark Knight, where she revealed that she wasn't going to go back to Bruce, that she chose Harvey. Bruce has spent the rest of his life believing that Rachel was going to leave Harvey for him and blaming himself in some way for her death as well, and carrying around that belief of what would have been. Well, this shatters his worldview and shatters everything that had led to his decision-making in the subsequent years. And Bruce blames Alfred. He lashes out in anger, and it's that if these were two normal, average actors delivering this scene, it would have been a good scene because it's well written. It would have probably even possibly been a powerful scene, but it would not have worked the way it did. The reason this scene works is because Alfred is heartbroken, and he's heartbroken to be saying these things to Bruce, to be doing this in the presence of Bruce, and Bruce is just as hurt as Alfred, but instead of reacting with sadness, he's reacting with anger. And he doesn't shout, he doesn't yell, it's all in his eyes, it's all in his face, the way that his facial expressions change as he hears Alfred's story, and it ultimately leads in them parting ways, and Alfred leaving, and Alfred no longer being Bruce's butler. And the heartbreak and the pain in Alfred's voice combined with the heartbreak and the anger in Bruce's voice, it just leads to me, one of the most emotional scenes in one of the most emotional movies for me of my life, and that would be The Dark Knight Rises. So got to give love to this scene. It's one that I think speaks to the power of these performances, and really speaks to the power of these characters that both actors, Michael Caine and Christian Bale, had inhabited for 3 movies.
Yeah, this is another one that I love, but couldn't find a spot for it on my list. God, just so many great scenes from throughout this trilogy. Like I said, I had a list of 25 I was trying to pick from, and this was certainly one of those. But I knew it would be on yours, Greg, because you've always been as big a fan as I am of the Gary Oldman performance and the Batman-Gordon dynamic in these movies. You are equally as big a fan of the Michael Caine performance and the Alfred Batman dynamic in these movies. So knew this one would make your list. Not surprising at all.
Indeed. David, I don't know if this one's on your list or not, but if not, do you want to comment on it?
Yeah, it's not on my list. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. Probably between that and like one or two others. Just so powerful, and I don't know. I always love Michael Caine. He always destroys performances, like not in a bad way. That kind of like you say, good thing kills, whatever. He does such a great job, beautiful job with all his performances, but he really throws his all into this, and just his heartbreak, it makes me cry every time.
Yeah. Samesies. And Nick, now that I've said the word samesies, I'm going to pitch to you for your number 3 selection.
My number 3 selection. So, I'm going to hop back over to The Dark Knight Rises for, spoiler alert, the final time on my list. And I talked about how my number 5 selection, the climactic action sequence, is one of the stronger action sequences in the film. And Greg, you talked about how I think it's unquestionable that Dark Knight Rises of the 3 films has the best action of any of them. And I think that there's no action sequence in that film better, whether it is laid out in regards to choreography or whether it's telling a story through a fight scene, than the absolutely brutal and visceral breaking of the bat scene between Batman and Bane down in the sewers of Gotham, where Batman has been led by Catwoman into this trap where Bane is awaiting him, and what plays out over the course of the next few minutes is a Bane who is supremely confident, who has no doubt in his mind about what's about to happen. And you have a Batman who starts out seemingly full of confidence, but as the scene wears on, you slowly start to see the doubt and frustration creep in on his face, and you see eventually him giving way to the inevitability of what's about to happen to him. And what's great is as the scene is going on, you're not just seeing Bane brutalize him and outmaneuver him in every conceivable way. You're also hearing Bane lay out his philosophy on why he's doing what he's doing and what separates him from Batman. And then he shows him, because it's important in this scene that he's not just physically breaking him, he's emotionally and mentally breaking him as well. And you see that culminate with Bane's reveal that he is going to use Batman's own technology from Wayne Enterprises to wreak havoc and terror across Gotham over the next several months. So he blows the roof, which turns out to be the floor of research and development from Wayne Enterprises. You see the tumblers drop down, and you see Bane move forward and lift Bruce up over his head and drop him down across his knee in brutal fashion, recreating the most iconic image from Nightfall, which we had all hoped, a bit sadistically, would be in the movie, and there it was.
Yes!
And there it was, recreated in brutal fashion, complete with one of the best bits of sound design, as you actually hear the crunch of Bruce's spine across the knee of Bane. And then Bane, of course, walks up, rips the cowl off, and Bruce is truly beaten. But all throughout this, like I said, it tells a story, and there's probably even more visceral to me than the actual moment of the backbreaking is the moment when Bane's got him pinned down against a hard surface and is just punching him repeatedly in the head. And you're seeing Bane's fist slam into Bruce's head and the back of Bruce's head slamming into this steel grate or whatever it is that he's lying on. And it is just... the entire scene, man, makes you cringe and makes you a little uncomfortable to watch it just because of the degree of ass-whooping that is being handed out. And I guess that's what ultimately I love about it so much.
Phenomenal. I mean, when Bane's punching him and hitting the mask and knocking it off, basically destroying the cowl, it feels like it actually... The best way to describe it would be the name of an erotic film I once read about called Extremely Hard and Incredibly Close. And it's just a great scene. And this was arguably, because the one thing we knew about The Dark Knight Rises going in was Bane was going to be in it. And so when you're going to do Bane and you're not Batman and Robin, to me, my mind automatically goes to, you got to do the scene. You got to do the backbreak scene. Will they do it? First of all, but if they do it, will they do it well? And they did. They didn't just do it well. They did it amazingly, and they homaged that iconic Jim Aparo or Jim Aparo or however you pronounce his name scene from Nightfall, the breaking of the bat. Such a tremendous scene in the comic. Such a tremendous scene in Nightfall, in fact. You just can't beat it, in my opinion. And I'm extremely happy that it made your list, Nick. It did not make mine, shockingly.
Wow, I'm surprised by that.
But by God, I almost did. Again, if I had a list of 6 or 7, it would be on there. David, any thoughts on this scene?
It's a wonderful, tense scene, but no, I really don't have much to add on that one, sadly.
Well, what is your number 3 selection?
Well, mine's one that Nick talked about, I guess, 2 scenes or just 1 scene back, the underground scene. Mm-hmm. And mine's for the whole build-up to it, like, not even just the action's incredibly well done. It's tense as can be, but you're seeing the Joker let loose even more. Just the playfulness as he's shooting and just looks so out of control. But, really enjoying himself. Just because of that, I don't know, that just has always made it even more tense to me and just more enjoyable. Seeing Batman block the rocket blast, just all of that. And then, of course, the most breathtaking, one of the most breathtaking scenes in there, as Nick talked about, the 18-wheeler flipping over. So, yeah, it's just an incredible scene that, like I said, gives me chills every time I watch it and just makes me so happy. Like last night, I was rewatching or the night before, just with the point of like narrowing down a couple of scenes. Ended up watching almost the whole movie just because of scenes like this. I could not turn it off or fast forward through it. I just blows me away. And then, of course, I want you to do it. I want you to do it.
Hey, that wasn't half bad. That's
Well,
That's the most surprising aspect of the show so far, is that was decent. My God.
Oh, but just stuff like that just makes me so happy in that scene. And yes, Nick, it's because I was actually trying to sound like the Joker is why it sounded semi-decent.
No, that's the most surprising part of it, is because usually when you try to sound like something, it comes out as some like weird hybrid of like that thing and some creature from like a ninth dimension.
Well, see, I thought you were saying I sound like the redneck Joker. I didn't think I sounded like it.
No, you sounded like a real Joker.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That was the surprising part.
You got my nether regions all excited.
Oh, God. Well,
wait just a minute here. This isn't that kind of show. I know I was talking about extremely hard and incredibly close, but we are incredibly close. So
I meant my chest hair was standing on end.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Do you find, and this scene also, David, reinforced your lifelong belief that slaughter is the best medicine?
I definitely agree with that. Yes, as any mental health professional would.
Fit in well in Gotham.
Which this actually might be the first time I've ever revealed that on air, what I do. But anyway, I guess that's really all I have to say about it. It's just, like I said, building off what Nick said, it was just an incredible scene.
That's all I got to say about that. Very good, sir. An excellent scene, as I mentioned earlier. Well, I am going to stick with the Joker theme here, because for my number 3 selection, I am returning to Mr. Ledger's performance, and I am going to, not his introduction in the film, but his second appearance in the film. And that is when the Joker arrives to interrupt a meeting of Gotham's mafia bosses. The underground kings of Gotham are meeting to discuss with Mr. Lau, a favorite of our show, the goings-on in Gotham and how Batman is disrupting their plan. And the Joker, I feel like I can't even say the word plan anymore without unintentionally making it sound like the Joker, but he shows up at this meeting and completely disrupts everything, walks in on these intimidating thugs and gangsters who are used to being shown respect, shows them no respect at all, walks right up. This, of course, includes the infamous pencil disappearing act, the magic scene. He walks in, he commands the room, he insults them all, basically. What happened? Your balls fall off? Stuff like that, making fun of Gamble's grandmother. Just so many great lines here as he's tearing these people down and belittling them. And then he comes up with the easy plan of killing the Batman. And I'll tell you, as I mentioned during the show a few weeks ago, my favorite part of this scene, as small as it is when he's talking to Mr. Lau, who's via satellite, and he refers to him as the television. It's so good, the television, and after he's made the pencil disappear, he's got the little the grenade pin in his jacket, and keeps threatening it, and even that's funny. It is so darkly funny, this scene, that to me it's another example of Ledger's genius in this role. One of the great performances in the history of modern cinema. And Ledger owns this scene. Everyone's good in it. Michael J. White is Gamble. Mr. Lau, of course, is always good. But the Joker is a force of nature here. He is a commanding presence, the likes of which this scene I remember made the hairs on my arm, which are significant for anyone who hasn't seen me in person. The hairs on my arm stand up. It's just a chilling scene and a funny scene, and I like it.
I will withhold comment for right now. David, do you have anything to add on this one?
It's one of the scenes that I wanted on my list so badly, but couldn't quite make it.
Yes.
It's one of those scenes that I rewatched just because, like I said, some of this stuff I cannot move past, even if I'm in a hurry trying to finalize my list.
Right. I'll go ahead and say for me, it is, of course, my number 2 scene on my list. So Greg laid it out so perfectly. It is, I would argue, while the opening sequence is a great introduction to the look and feel of the Joker and kind of what the character is basically going to be, building the foundation, this takes that foundation and expands upon it and gives you the first real glimpse at how this guy deals with people, what his aims are, and just kind of how he's going to handle himself in situations where he's clearly outmatched. Physically, he has no business threatening these guys or being in any sort of, conflict with them, but it's his maniacal plans, his love of chaos that has these people completely bewildered. And it's clear that these mob bosses who pride themselves on being composed have no idea what to make of this guy, and he has them, he is pulling the string on each of them throughout the entire scene. And of course, the magic trick is like one of the most raw memories I still have seeing this movie for the first time, because there was an audible gasp in that theater the first time we saw it, and it was one of those moments that I'll never forget as long as I live. So, yeah, Greg said it so well. I won't add too much to that, but yeah, the mob scene with the Joker and the television is my number 2 scene on my list.
He played those mobsters like a harp from hell.
He did.
Excellent choice, obviously, Nick. I approve of it. Now, David, what would be your number 2 scene here on our countdown list?
Well, mine sadly doesn't include the Joker, but it does include the television. Mr. Lau.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
That breathtaking, it's going to be the action leading up to it, but it's really about all of it. Just the whole smugness of Mr. Lau right before then, talking to Mr. Lucius Fox and everything, getting mad about him, breaking the deal. But then that just amazing scene, just I guess it's an aerial shot above, watching Batman as he plans out that attack. It is one of the most breathtaking and beautiful scenes I've seen in any movie. And then seeing him take them down, and then, of course, seeing that smug guy, Mr. Lau, I guess it wouldn't be arrested, but whatever, get apprehended to go back. It is just so great. Something like, just the whole setup to it is a wonderful thing. But yeah, just, I guess because it's kind of creative how he takes everybody down, it's just wonderful Batman scene.
The creativity of the action, which is like something you would see in an Arkham game,
right?
Like the creativity of how he takes them down, the visuals of the cityscape,
the cinematography in that scene is just breathtaking. I was lucky enough to see it in 70mm IMAX at the Mall of Georgia the Monday after it opened, and I remember when the screen filled up. It's that shot of Batman standing on top of the skyscraper and he's looking down. I was just blown away. Like, that was the moment in which I knew that, like, that IMAX conversion for this film was totally worth seeing it. It was like a completely different presentation of the film.
I actually usually pause it at the very beginning of that. I just want to take it in. I wish I had a slow motion button like I used to have on one of my old DVD players, just so I could slow that down, just because it's such a beautiful aerial shot and it's such a cool...
It may be, there's a handful of them in the series, but if you're talking about a still image, that may be the most iconic image of the Dark Knight trilogy. Maybe, okay, let's take the Joker out of the equation, okay?
Right.
But, like, if you look at the entire trilogy, that may be the still image that is the most iconic in the trilogy. I mean, I think of it, whenever I think of Batman in the context of the trilogy, that's the scene I think of like him standing perched on that building looking over Hong Kong. And we talked about it here on the show. That shot was so gorgeous that we've seen movies try to replicate it since then, because it was just so breathtaking. Not to say that no one had ever done a shot of somebody on a building and stuff like that. I get that. But that location, that angle, the lighting, just perfect.
Absolutely.
So that leads to my number 2 scene, And it's a scene that I know for a fact will end up atop one of my cohorts lists here. But my number 2 scene is the interrogation scene from The Dark Knight. This is the Joker and Batman face-to-face for what may be the first time actually having a conversation with each other. I think it is, Nick. Is that correct?
No, they have a brief exchange at the party whenever the Joker crashes Harvey Dent's fundraiser, but it's very brief. So
this is a chance as the lights go out, Gordon leaves, lights go on, Batman's there. It is probably the most would consider the best scene in the trilogy, I think, or a lot of people would consider it that, and with good reason, because it's these two forces of nature, these diametrically opposed forces of nature, face to face, battling in a way that we see in the most iconic Batman Joker comics. Dark Knight Returns, of course, the Killing Joke, which is what it most evokes, but it's the Joker and Batman laying out their differences and their similarities, because Batman wants to punish the Joker. He wants the Joker's plan foiled. He wants to put him away. The Joker is trying to convince Batman that they're actually the same. That if he really is honest with himself, that Batman, like the Joker, is an outsider. He's a freak. And it's everybody else that had the problem, not them. And he just wants them to see that. But in the course of doing that, the Joker is established as the greatest comic book villain, the greatest movie villain, all of this. Batman punches him, he hurts him, and the Joker makes it clear that he doesn't mind at all. That there's nothing in all your power. For all your power, there's nothing you have to hurt me. And to top it all off, you get this, this just creepy and menacing Joker and also moments of levity there, comedy. Batman doesn't find any of it funny. Batman is there trying to assert his will and trying to treat the Joker like he would treat any other thug. And I think this is what makes it clear that the Joker is different. The Joker is not any other thug. He is not any other criminal. He is not motivated by the same things that motivate the cowardly and superstitious lot that Bruce had trained himself to take down, along with the League of Assassins, or League of Shadows, rather. So it's just an amazing scene, a powerful scene, and one that gives us...
Absolutely. David, do you have anything you want to add on this one?
No.
Oh, so I think I know what's about to happen, because we've reached the time for my number 1 selection, and as Greg alluded to, the interrogation scene is my number 1 choice. It's not just my favorite scene in this trilogy, it is probably my favorite scene in any movie ever. It's that well done. I would make a strong argument. You could take literally any Batman Joker scene from any comic book. I will let you pick any one you want. And I think this one stands right alongside it, if not surpasses it. This might be the definitive Batman Joker scene across all media. Whether it is the character notes of the Joker accepting Batman's physical power over him while laughing it off, essentially, whether it is the Joker, continually trying to egg Batman on and trying to elicit an emotional response for him, and you just see Bruce's continued rage building throughout the scene as it becomes clear to you that he has no idea how to really handle this kind of a threat. He's wholly unprepared for something like the Joker that he can't threaten or intimidate. It is just an amazing scene from beginning to end, and it also has one of my favorite bits of dialogue from the entire trilogy as the Joker is laying out to Batman. He says something to the effect of, don't talk like one of them, you're not, and eventually they'll cast you out like a leper. These civilized people, they'll eat each other. I mean, I'm doing a bad job. I'm butchering. I'm not directly quoting it, but the entire Joker ethos is one that, quite frankly, I often see a lot of sense in, and it's one that really helps to illustrate how these two characters are closer in a lot of ways than Batman would like to believe, as Greg said. So I've talked plenty about it. Greg's talked plenty about it.
And you also get the moment of the Joker saying when Batman says, "Well, then why do you want to kill me?" And the Joker says, "I don't want to kill you. I don't know what I'd do." You know,
which I think is a lie, by the way.
You never know. You
Yeah.
never know with him. Everything is a lie.
Right.
He's the ultimate liar in this movie. He is what Gorilla Monsoon thought Bobby Heenan was.
Right.
Throughout their commentary. David, I believe this may be your selection. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, but mine extends a little further than that, just for one particular line. But before I get to that, something that struck me even more this time, my most recent watch, was like him breaking down the fact of whether or not, he asked, "What time is it?" And then he's like, "What does that matter?" And he's like, "Well, he could be in this spot or several."
Oh yeah,
that just made me laugh so much because it's so menacing, but also funny because it's delivered by him. And it's just really tense, but I don't know, just iconic scenes. My words elude me as they typically do when I'm on the air. And then of course, whenever he gets to deliver, "I just want my phone call," and that's nothing like it at all. Good God. I knew I would not be able to do. Hold on. No. But anyway, Greg, you do it. Just do a good version.
I just want my phone call.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I did it last night, and I was kind of proud of it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to replicate it on air, so at least I almost did it earlier with the
Hang on,
other
let me see if I can do a Randy Savage version of it. I don't know. Oh, yeah, I just want my phone call, yeah. It's all right. Carry on, David. Sorry.
Y'all said it all. It's watching them go back and forth, and Batman realized that he can't just beat the hell out of him and win. It's just an incredible scene. Nick, do you have "I just want my phone call" impression?
No, I don't do that. No.
Come on, you should.
It's not my
I
gimmick.
really think you should,
gimmick.
Nick. I think this is a good idea. This is a healing moment for us.
Okay, let's see if I can find one. Now listen here, fuckers. I just want my fucking phone call.
There we go. There we go. Sometimes, Nick, you just have to listen to the words of a famous song from the early 90s. I just want to sex you up. That's what you need to do to us sometimes, Nick, is sex us up.
Yes, anyway, this is both our number one scenes, mine and David's. We've talked about it a lot. It was Greg's number two scene. And now, appropriately enough, let's end the show with the final scene of the entire trilogy, which is where Greg's going, I'm sure.
Yes, spoiler alert. I was going to try to swerve you and say the death scene of Talia al Ghul, but
I almost used that earlier.
I opted not to. So my number one scene in the trilogy is, as Nick pointed out, the very last scene of the trilogy. Now, I pointed out at the end of our last episode that there are multiple reasons why The Dark Knight Rises strikes such a chord with me. One of which is I am a sucker for a happy ending. Number two, I am a sucker for conclusion stories in general. I like to see a story wrapped up. I like to see threads that were, pulled out a little bit in the first part of a series, brought around and brought full circle and wrapped up. I love to see that circle of storytelling come to a complete stop, basically. And in this case, The Dark Knight Rises provided me with that, and it did it largely in my number one selection, which is the coda to The Dark Knight Rises, as I call it. This is the climax of the film has happened. The bat, as they call it, or the Batwing, has exploded, and seemingly Batman is dead, although the threat of Bane and Talia has been defeated. From there, we go to essentially an extended collage of scenes, and that's why I have to count it as one scene here, the coda here, the epilogue to The Dark Knight Rises, because you get in a matter of a few minutes the incredibly emotional funeral for Bruce Wayne, which includes the single most heartbreaking scene in the trilogy, the one scene in movies that is guaranteed to make me cry every time I watch it, which is Alfred at the grave of Thomas and Martha Wayne, shedding tears and apologizing to them for failing them and for failing their son. It includes the last will and testament of Bruce Wayne as he turns Wayne Manor. He gives all of his worldly possessions to Alfred and to allow him to live a life of luxury. Other than that, he deems that Wayne Manor be turned into an orphanage to take care of the kids that John Blake had told him earlier in the film that he had left behind, he and his family had left behind. He's giving back. He also leaves just a few things for one John Blake, a.k.a. Robin. And we get to see the scene that ties together the movie of Alfred in Italy, seemingly just enjoying a cup of coffee, and he looks over.
Not a cup of coffee, a Fernet Branca.
What the hell is that? I don't even know.
I don't know, but it was a very specific type of alcoholic beverage that Alfred mentioned earlier in the film.
That's right. It does.
It looks like sherry.
Yeah, it's served in a very small glass. It's a Fernet Branca.
Well, he's drinking a Ralph Branca, and he looks over, as in his dream.
A
but
Fernet Branca is a bitter herbal liqueur. There you are.
Herbal or herbal?
Whatever you want to call it.
I'm sure Herbs drink it too.
Some guy's named Herb. Yeah, that's a good point.
Herbal,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, he looks over, and this time he actually sees Bruce staring back at him, and in that moment, that feeling of heartbreak that you felt just a minute or two earlier at the funeral, it goes away, and there is a Grinch-like moment where I can feel my heart growing 2 sizes that day, as I just feel so happy for Alfred, that Alfred gets the satisfaction of knowing, by God, he's happy. He's alive, and he's healthy, and he's happy, and he's not Batman anymore. And simultaneously, for the first time in my lifetime of reading Batman comics, you get a true happy ending for Batman. You get a ride-off in the sunset moment for Bruce and Selina, 2 characters that deserve it, that deserve to have this opportunity because they're never going to get it in the comics, to be happy together, to end their journey as Batman and Catwoman, per se, and to just have a conclusion to their story. It's a conclusion to the Batman story that we'll never get in the comics. And to top it all off, because you have to leave something behind. You have to leave something for the future, and you have to pay off the conversation in the plane from Batman Begins between Bruce and Alfred, in which they lay out Bruce's vision of what Batman is and what Batman can be, which is a symbol. And so they show John Blake, who, as we established last week, is a conglomeration of Tim Drake, Jason Todd, and my favorite comic book character of all time, Dick Grayson. And you see him explore the area around the cave, the Batcave, and then the movie ends, and take into account the name of this movie, The Dark Knight Rises, it ends with John Blake rising up and taking over the legacy of Batman. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it right now. It's like, it is the most inspirational, the most satisfying is a good word to describe it. Like, emotionally satisfying conclusion to a movie that I can ever remember. It's the same kind of reason that I fell in love with Return of the Jedi when I was a kid. You know, it's this feeling of completeness, this feeling of the story is wrapped up, the characters are happy, the good guys won. And it's good to go to a movie and to feel that once in a while, particularly in a movie franchise that was very dark, very grounded, very gritty, very, quote, realistic, and for a franchise that has been accused of being grimdark and all this other stuff. It ends in the most hopeful manner that I can remember a comic book movie ending in since, gosh, Richard Donner's Superman. It's incredible. So that's my favorite scene. Sorry for talking so long, guys, but that's my favorite scene.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. I knew it would be your favorite scene. Once again, it's another one that if it was a top 10 list, it probably would have made my list. But just slightly edged out, but I knew it had a big impact on you. And while the John Blake stuff for me clearly doesn't land as hard as it does for you, I mean, the Alfred bit of it and the getting to see Bruce happy, that was really probably the riskiest and most gutsy thing that Chris Nolan did with his entire trilogy. Even though it was ending, and even though he knew, you know, it's not like it matters ultimately long term, it's not like somebody else is going to pick up the franchise and try to continue it on from that ending. Still, having the balls to show us a Bruce Wayne who, like, just voluntarily walks away from being Batman, outstanding. Loved everything about it.
And honestly, who wouldn't want a happy ending with Anne Hathaway or Catwoman, either one?
Who wouldn't? That's true. And as you saw in that scene, Bruce had given her quite the pearl necklace.
Yes, the same pearl necklace that his mother once had.
He gave her the same pearl necklace that his father once gave his mother. That's right. He's just carrying on an old family tradition. That's right. So let's remind everybody of what our lists were. David, you're the guest. I'll let you go first. Just kind of a refresher on your 5 through 1.
Okay. Batman and Catwoman fighting for the first time. The bank heist at 4. Underground scene from Dark Knight. That's 3. The break-in in Hong Kong to get Mr. Lau, number 2. And the interrogation scene is number 1.
Excellent. And I had the Joker and Two-Face at the hospital at 5. Bruce and Alfred in the stairway at number 4. Joker with the Mafia Thugs at number 3. The Interrogation at number 2. And the Coda to the Dark Knight Rises at number 1. Nick?
I had the climactic action sequence of the Dark Knight Rises at number 5. I had the chase sequence with the 18-wheeler flip and the Batpod introduction at number 4. I had the breaking of the bat at number 3. I had the magic trick / mob scene from number 2, and the interrogation was, of course, my number 1.
Well, that brings an end to Countdown, and gosh, Nick, I can't believe it's already been a month, but this will bring an end to Dark Knight month. What a month it's been. Yeah,
it really has. I can't say that it necessarily enhanced my love for the trilogy, because my love for this trilogy is so well documented at this point. It's my favorite trilogy of all time. These 3 movies are in order of Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, and Batman Begins are legitimately my 3 favorite movies of all time, let alone comic book films. So it's not like they could be raised anymore in terms of their standing in my head, but always great to revisit them. Always great to revisit not just the films, but the memories of the build to the films and the events surrounding getting to see them for the first time. So, been a blast, and I'm kind of sad, honestly, to be leaving it behind, because we're going to go back to being a bit more critical of things. And so this has been a nice change of pace to just openly love something so much without any room for nitpicking or criticism.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me too, Nick, to read. Like you said, it's not that it's enhanced necessarily, although I will say I think Batman Begins was greatly enhanced by my recent rewatch of it. I've always liked the movie, but I think viewing it now in the context of the entire trilogy, I love it even more than I did in 2005. Just having an excuse to revisit these movies was so much fun for us. We hope it was fun for you, the listening audience. And I don't know if anybody got anything or any enjoyment out of us verbally filleting this series, but it was fun for me. It was good for us to get a lot of these memories for our friendship out there in public and talk about that. So I'm going to miss Dark Knight Month. It was a lot of fun, and I couldn't think of a better way to close it out than to have you on with us, David. Thank you for joining us and sharing your memories of the trilogy through your countdown. Tell the folks where they can find you on social media and what you might have coming up in the Sunday Groove.
Well, I can't tell people what I have coming up, but I'll first leave with Sunday Groove, PTB on Twitter. Or you can find me, David Sunday, on Facebook. I actually don't know what's coming up next, but I just finished a very fun, appropriately enough, a Chris Nolan length episode about the 90s music and focused on albums that I loved while I was actually in the 90s. So that was a whole lot of fun. I had Miranda on for that one. And I still want to throw some love for Alter Bridge, that one I had you on last month. That was a lot of fun, too. So I always have new things coming up. I should be deciding that pretty soon, but as of this moment, I actually really don't know.
And, David, I trust you'll be joining us for the next installment of Comic Book Theater in the very near future.
Oh, of course, of course.
That should be a fun experience. So yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the subject, Nick, I'm just very curious. What were your favorite albums in the 90s?
Well, let's see. You got, of course,
you were there.
Yes. Of course, any discussion of albums in the 90s, you have to start with Brooks and Dunn's Boot Scootin' Boogie.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a place you have to talk about. I think you also have to talk about Billy Ray Cyrus's debut album, Some Gave All.
Some Gave All.
Yeah,
yes.
You got to talk about that.
All gave some, Nick.
Yes, all gave some, but some gave all. Some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall, Greg. But that's neither here nor there. Of course, you've got Garth Brooks' No Fences. I mean, there's just so many different ways you could go with greatest album of the 90s. But one thing's for sure, they will almost all feature white men on the cover wearing plaid button-up shirts tucked into blue jeans with oversized belt buckles.
Oftentimes, very, very skin-tight jeans.
Yes. These
look like
jeans,
they'd be impossible to walk in.
Yes, jeans so tight, you wonder if these men have any testicles.
And if it's Garth Brooks, he'll have a giant checkerboard pattern for some reason on his shirt.
Absolutely.
Oh, terrific. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, David, for joining us tonight. Any of you out there, we want to hear your list. We want to hear your countdown, whether you're as big a fan of the trilogy as we are or not. We want to hear your 5 favorite scenes from the 3 movies. Send us those lists. Hit us up on Twitter. I am at gphillips8652. He is at Nick Duke 87. And we should probably mention this, Nick. We have a brand new Twitter page for Place to Be Nation Comics. It is PTBN Comics. Just go to Twitter, type in PTBN Comics. You'll find us. Follow us. We will follow back. A follow for a follow. It's only fair. And we will provide you with all of our content that we put out there. We'll have polls. We'll have discussions. We're trying to make it kind of a Twitter version of what we do over at the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page, which we urge you to check out. Great discussions there. David's a part of that as well. A lot of folks are a part of it. And other than that, also our email addresses, Nick, the loneliest email addresses on the internet, Greg P. at placetobenation.com, Nick D. at placetobenation.com. And finally, as always, if you have any complaints about the show, things you don't like, we urge you to tweet your thoughts at JRsBBQ. That's at JRSBBQ. Well, stay with us, folks. When we come back from the break, we're going to have Reading, Watching, and a very special edition of The Rundown. Stay with us. You won't want to miss it.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTB and Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead.
As well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans.
With the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in all places to be nation. I'm Greg, he's Nick. You know the whole deal. We're back to give you a little more of a taste, baby. A taste, if you will, of a little bit of what we got cooking in a segment we like to call Reading and Watching.
Reading and watching. What you been reading and watching? What you been reading and watching?
So, Nick, I'm going to be up front with you about something.
Mm-hmm.
I have not read a thing outside of work in the last calendar week. I have not watched a comic book property on television.
My lord, man.
I have not consumed anything comic book related in a week outside of trailers for things, which I suppose we will save for the rundown.
For a very special edition of the rundown coming up here in the next few minutes. Yeah. All right, so real quick, let's just run through this. I'll start with my watching. I watched another episode of Season 2 of Jessica Jones. I watched the second episode. Loving this still. I thought the story was going in a certain direction, and by the end of the episode, it made clear that it was not going in the direction I thought it would. It was legitimately surprising to me, the twist they have there at the end of the second episode. I'm loving the character dynamics. I am just digging everything that's going on so far. It's driving home to me why I think Jessica Jones is the best and most consistently presented character in the Marvel Netflix universe. That was the only thing I read this week, watched this week, but I did get quite a bit of reading done, actually. So real quick, I'm going to run you through some books that I read. Detective Comics. I read issue 982, and this is just like a little random one-shot. It feels like it was almost one that had just been held in the can for a little while. It takes place right after James Tynion IV's run, but before Brian Edward Hill's run. So it's just a one-issue story written by somebody named Moretti and drawn by somebody with the last name of Fiumara. And I have to say, this reminds me a lot, Greg. If you remember that 2-part Detective Comic story that Ben Percy did that was kind of like his big coming out party for the DC Universe, I think it was called Terminal.
Yeah.
Not quite as good as this, but for a book that I had zero expectations for, I really, really enjoyed this one-issue story. It's called The Cult of Blackfire. It's a story about Deacon Blackfire trying to come back to the land of the living by taking this young boy hostage, and like his followers are going to perform this ritual to bring him back to life. And it's just a story about Batman facing a threat that he truly doesn't understand because it's supernatural in nature, and also trying to find positivity in his life to offset the darkness that Deacon Blackfire is claiming is overrunning Gotham. He's trying to prove him wrong by showing him there are still good things out there. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought the art was good, had kind of a Frank Miller meets Tim Sale kind of vibe to it. The writing was solid. Big surprise here on Detective Comics 982 for me. Then I read, finally, even out of order, I might add, I finally read the Amazing Spider-Man Free Comic Book Day issue that kind of sets up Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley, Nick run and Ryan Ottley's run on the Amazing Spider-Man, setting up the dynamic of Peter with his new roommate situation and how Boomerang, the lead character from Superior Foes of Spider-Man from several years ago, is going to play into the book. So, funny read, enjoyed it, quick breezy read because it's a free comic book day read. And then I also read a ton of Jason Aaron stuff this week, a ton, because I read the Free Comic Book Day Avengers issue, and then also read Avengers 2 through 5. So 5 Avengers issues. Suffice it to say, I am loving this title so far. We all knew Jason Aaron could write Thor. That comes as no surprise. But his writing of Ghost Rider in particular, as well as his nailing of the Tony Stark, Thor, Captain America Big Three dynamic, just outstanding. The art from Ed McGuinness depicting a larger, more cosmic threat than we typically see the Avengers involved in. I've loved everything about this book so far. It drives home to me why Jason Aaron is such a great writer of not just Thor, but the Marvel Universe as a whole. And of course, I can't talk about Jason Aaron without talking about Jason Aaron's Thor run, as I finally got an opportunity to sit down and read Thor 1 through 3, the recent relaunch featuring the God of Thunder. The writing from Jason Aaron is outstanding as always, but the art from Del Mundo, I don't know, it's a little weird for my taste, a little surrealistic, which is odd coming on the heels of first Asad Ribic and then Russell Dodderman doing the character, so it's going to take me a little while to get used to. I won't call it bad, just not what I was expecting from a Thor comic, but I've loved the story to this point. We are seeing Thor striking out across the 9 realms in search of these mystical artifacts that scattered whenever Asgardia was destroyed by the Mangog at the end of the Mighty Thor run. And just the character dynamics continue to be nailed. For the first time, really, in the book's history, Loki is playing a major, or not in the book's history, but in Jason Aaron's run, Loki is playing a major role, sharing a lot of scenes with Thor, and he is proving to be just as great a Loki writer as he is a Thor writer. I've enjoyed all the twists and turns along the way, and I can't wait for... I know you keep saying one day you're going to get caught up on the Jason Aaron Thor run. That day needs to be soon, because he's continuing to kill it. And then finally, following off our contentious discussion of Batman 50 a couple weeks ago, I read Batman 51 and predictably loved it. Tom King, Lee Weeks on art, telling a story of Bruce Wayne getting called for jury duty, of all things. And while that sounds a little bit silly on its face, eventually you get an explanation for why Bruce is wanting to be on this jury and not trying to get out of it, and what exactly is going on in his mindset. And also, Greg, something that might warm your heart towards Tom King a little bit, we do get a scene of Jim Gordon on the rooftop turning on the bat signal, and Batman shows up and says, "What can I do to help?" And Gordon goes, "You're not him, you're that other him." And it's
referring to Dick Betts.
Heavily implied that Dick Grayson is taking over for Batman, at least during the stint of Bruce being sequestered for jury duty. So, loving this story based off the first issue. Waiting to see where it's going to go from here. It's an intriguing idea they're playing with here.
Two thoughts.
Yes.
Number one, always glad to see Dick Betts. I'm a big fan of that dynamic. That's good. Two, I think there's an interesting story also in Bruce Wayne trying to get out of jury duty. I don't know that I've ever seen that. Just like, it's like, what the hell do I have to do to get out of jury duty, Alfred? And then also, all of this seems good. This actually sounds like a really good issue. I read a recap of it from our colleague Stephen Ferrari, and it seemed like it would be a book that would be up my alley were I not in such a place as I was after Batman 50. And without getting too far in the weeds, I also read something in a solicit that for an upcoming issue that feels as if it is a direct troll to me personally from Mr. King, perhaps after listening to our show last week. So I will refrain from comment on that, though. For
in your version, if you had the pencil for the DC universe, you know what you would be? You know what Dick Grayson would be?
What would Dick Grayson be?
He would be your hardcore Holly. How about you give me the belt? And then I beat everybody.
Yeah, and then he would take Tim Drake, and he would. I'm not gonna. Never mind. I forgot that. I don't want to bring that up because the kid's passed away recently. But do the Tough Enough situation with Tim Drake. That would be good. Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, Nick. You got to move on. You got to let the next generation take over this business. Fossils like Bruce Wayne need to move aside. No, I'm just kidding. What I would do, though, Nick, is I would attempt to build new talent to make them appear on the level of the old talent so that you can further diversify your brand with characters. But instead, what writers tend to do over the years is treat Dick Grayson as cannon fodder. Cannon fodder.
Are you here? Do you mean to tell me that you take exception to the idea that Dick Grayson could be beaten by the KG Beast?
Not just beaten, but gravely wounded by the KG Beast. That's, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, Nick. I'm not going to pussyfoot around it. I think it's a worn out trope. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I think Tom King writes Dick Grayson really well, and I'm sure the run's going to be fine. But that's, and I guess I'll take whatever Dick bat I can get, or Bat Dick, if you will. But I'm not at all pleased with using him as another prop in Batman's eternal inner anguish. But we're dealing in hypotheticals. We're dealing in future stuff. You know, like I said, I'm not gonna critique a book that I'm not reading. But yes, glad to hear you liked it. Glad to hear the issue was good. I'm sure it was. And it sounds like it was good. So, anything else on the reading pile, Nick?
No, that was it. It was a good week of reading. I read let's see here, a dozen books or so, and that's probably a high for me in recent months. So, there is an outside chance that I will get caught up before football season begins, which will kill all my ability to be caught up, but let's hope I at least get there before football season. If anything, the last few months have just shown me I need to cut back on my pull list because I can't keep up with these things when I'm not extremely busy, let alone when I'm about to be extremely busy.
Well, with all that said, Nick, I am going to pick up Doomsday Clock at some point in the next week and try to get it read by our next podcast.
Yes, as
other than that, I make no promises. But I will also try to watch more of Krypton. But with all that said, I think we need to, while we have a chance, because we do have a special edition of the Rundown tonight, I think we need to take just a few moments here. Put a little bit of time on the clock.
Oh, wow. Going out of order a little bit. All right.
Yeah. I think we need to put about, you know what? Let's go back to about 2002, Nick. And let's put 3 minutes on the clock. And let's start right now with the wrestling 3 minutes. Nicholas, I don't know about you, but I've been catching up on the G1 Climax tournament.
I'm still behind. I've watched the first 3 nights, so I have 3 more nights, I think, that I need, or 4. Is it 4 more nights at this point?
I don't know, honestly. The last one I watched was night 5, I think. No, it was 6. It was whatever the main event of the last show I watched was Ishii versus Goto, and it was outstanding.
Yeah, I'm 4 nights behind because there's been 7 nights. There have been 4 A block nights and 3 B block nights to this point, with another B block night tonight as we record this.
So I only have an A block show to watch, but I continue to. This is our, as Nick and I have talked, this is our first time watching New Japan Pro Wrestling's G1 Climax tournament live, or not live, but as close to live as we can get. As it happens, and following the events and the matches. And let me just say, I get it. I've been reading hype about this tournament from Dave Meltzer and other folks for years, and it's really been cool to watch. The matches are outstanding. The vibe is outstanding. Wins and losses matter in a way that they don't in WWE. It is a different product, and it's a great product, and it's been fun to watch. And I think my MVP of the tournament so far, quite honestly, has probably been Tetsuya Naito, who has had the matches with Kenny Omega and Tomohiro Ishii, and who was it? I think Juice Robinson he wrestled. And all of them excellent matches. I think Ishii has had actually probably my 2 favorite matches of the tournament so far. Ishii versus Naito is my match of the tournament right now, and Ishii versus Goto is probably in second or third, along with Omega and Naito. And then Hangman Page has had a great showing in this tournament, really impressing me with his performance. Nick, what stood out to you so far about the G1 Climax?
Yeah, like I said, I've only seen the first 3 nights, so I would still say Omega and Naito is probably my match of the tournament to this point. But as you said, Tetsuya Naito continuing to impress, but also let's throw a little love to a guy that I don't think anybody expected to impress coming in the tournament. It's Toru Yano, who's kind of like wrestling outside his comfort zone a bit, telling different stories with his matches than we typically get, showing a little bit more range than just the comedy guy. I think he's put on really compelling matches, told good stories.
Agreed.
Thus far. So yeah, big shout out to him, and also like you said, Goto, Ishii, all the Hosses really in the tournament. I know it's unpopular to say so, but I think Michael Elgin has performed well based on what I've seen to this point. And Evil, of course, which is his one and only name. All the Hoss types have done a great job to this point, and I can't wait to catch up further.
Yeah, I'm really I'm excited for JR to call Ishii versus Goto, because it was a physically intense battle between 2 people that just don't care about knocking the dog shit out of each other. And then, on a real quick WWE note, we'll put a little overtime on the clock here. We have got SummerSlam coming up. Quick prediction, Nick. Now we're a month out, give or take, from SummerSlam, so maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves here. But who walks out of SummerSlam? WWE Champion, Universal Champion, Raw Women's Champion, SmackDown Women's Champion.
Oh God, I don't even know what order you said those in anymore. But
any order that you want.
Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch leave as your respective women's champions. AJ Styles leaves as your WWE champion. Kevin Owens leaves as your Universal champion.
I like it. I like the balls on that pick. I'm going to say that. I am going to say that Alexa Bliss leaves as the women's champion on Raw. No, I take that back. I'm going to say Ronda leaves as the Raw champion. Carmella leaves as the SmackDown champion. AJ as the WWE champion. And Roman Reigns as the Universal champion. So we'll just have to we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. I love your theory. But with that being said, all we've got left, Nick, do we want to talk about what's coming up later for us? Or we want to save that till the end of the rundown? What do we want to do? We got a special edition this week.
Well, we'll save that for the very end. But with that being said, it is time for a very special edition of our segment where we look at all the news and notes from the comic book world. It's time for the rundown.
Welcome to the rundown, where we talk some comic news. Welcome to the rundown, where we talk about movies too.
Ladies and gentlemen, for this week's edition of the rundown, we have what we in the business call a run-in. Because joining us...
This is history making, by the way. We've never had a rundown guest before in the history of our show. So, pretty unprecedented here.
The long history of our show.
Yep.
And we have coming to us straight via satellite from the deserts of Las Vegas, we have none other than the MVP of Place to Be Nation Comics, Mr. Ben Morse. Ben, welcome to the rundown.
Oh my God, guys, what an honor to be the first guest on the rundown. And what a great time to join up. I'm so happy to be part of Dark Knight Month. And I'm really chomping to discuss Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the next part of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight quadrilogy.
Yes, I am eagerly anticipating seeing how all of the deep emotional themes of the Dark Knight trilogy are expounded upon in the form of CGI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
CGI and ending conflicts over having a shared mother with the same first name.
Oh my God. No, I have been so enjoying all the content you guys have been putting out this month. I've been slavishly listening to every second of what you are talking about, the Dark Knight trilogy. I have a new appreciation for this trilogy that I've never had before. It's thanks to you guys and the literal hours of time I've spent with you over the past 4 weeks. Normally, between driving to and from work, walking my dog, and playing WWE 2K18, I go through a lot of podcasts just as I'm listening. But I've been able to pretty much exclusively listen to the Hard-Traveling Fanboys since July started. So thank you for that gift.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. We live to serve. And much like we would say, we would hope that Mr. Nolan would say to us, flattery will get you everywhere, Ben.
Well, I mean, I guess I should explain that it's not like I was the first invited guest on the rundown. No, I forced my way in here, as I do to most podcasts. I basically texted you guys, and I was like, I knew that it dawned on me as I was listening to your last episode. I was like, oh, they're going to cover Comic-Con next week. Mm-hmm. And for the first time since 2004, I didn't have a vested interest in Comic-Con this year professionally. 2004 was the summer after I graduated college, where I flew on my own dime out to Comic-Con and basically said, I'm not leaving until I've annoyed, much like how I got on this podcast, until I've annoyed people enough so that I get a job somewhere. And that's where I got my job at Wizard, and then for the next 3 years, Comic-Con was about doing stuff for Wizard, and then for 10 years after that, it was about doing stuff for Marvel, even though last year, my daughter was born a week before Comic-Con, so I didn't really need to do that much.
Right.
And I definitely didn't go. I haven't been in a couple of years, but this year, getting to sit back and observe it as a fan again, much like everything that's been going on for the past few months for me in comics, it's just was revelatory. I was like, I mean, I'm the one who, give a little behind the scenes, I'm the one who will start the Facebook threads with you guys, being like, guys, isn't this cool? Kelly Sue Comics writing one. Aquaman,
right,
and stuff like that, and you guys just put up with it, which I appreciate.
Always. No, you have a lot of insight to the industry, as Mr. Ross would say, that we don't have. And it's good to talk. It's good just to chop it up. I love talking comics with my buddies, of which I count you. So we're happy to have you on to talk about Comic-Con, and we have a giant slate of stuff to talk about.
And it's interesting too because you mentioned being uniquely positioned because you're kind of untethered for the first time in a while. And as we discussed a little bit, off air, kind of weird this year's Comic-Con because there wasn't really a ton of earth-shaking Marvel news. It really does feel like DC kind of dominated the week.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are some Marvel announcements that I think we'll get into, but I mean, speaking from experience, I know that Marvel has a lot of different ways of getting their announcements out there. They don't necessarily go exclusively through Comic-Con. They run some great panels at the show. My buddy Ricky Purden hosts most of them. C.B. Cebulski, another friend, is the editor-in-chief and does a lot of work there. But, yeah, man, I'm not going to lie to you. Most of the stuff I got excited for this year was DC. I think if you were keeping score at home, for sure, in terms of Marvel versus DC at Comic-Con, you'd have to put a big old check mark in the DC column.
No doubt. And having said all that, the first story on the rundown is a Marvel-related story and not a positive one. So we have to lead off with the biggest story of the weekend, which is the ongoing James Gunn situation. James Gunn, the writer-director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. We've talked at length about our love of those movies here on the show. Well, some stuff came to light this past week that there were tweets sent out on his, as you would expect on his Twitter account, since they're tweets, quite some time ago, back in 2011, I think, is the most recent, and then going back from there, that were of a very controversial nature, jokes that I'm not going to repeat on the show, jokes that weren't really funny, quite frankly, and it got sent out by some people that were upset with some of his political tweets. And as a result of this controversy and the nature of the tweets, Marvel decided to remove him from the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. This was a decision that he accepted and released a statement taking blame for what he'd done in the past. The cast of the film has spoken out on this issue almost unanimously in support of him. None stronger than Dave Bautista, our good buddy of the show. I'd like to think he's a buddy of the show. We've never actually had him on, but Dave, please, if you're listening, join the show. He was very strong in his words about it, his support for James Gunn. James's brother Sean, who of course plays Kraglin in the Guardians movies, also issued a statement about this on Twitter. It's a very complex situation. I'm not gonna come out really strongly anyway on it because I think it's a complicated scenario. But any thoughts from the panel on this situation over the weekend?
I mean, it's a situation with a lot of moving parts. You have to take into account. I mean, on the largest possible scale. Look, I'm a professor who teaches a social media class. And one of the things I kind of espouse to my class is that we are in an age now where nothing can be done without consequence and response. Nothing. You look at when Roseanne had her controversy a few months ago. You can't make a statement in a vacuum anymore. You can't just controversially say whatever you want because you will be held accountable by the entire public. Now, in this instance, it's obviously something that happened many years ago, and whether or not you think that deserves the treatment that it got is almost inconsequential. The fact is that these are huge corporate characters, and you said Marvel removed him, but I think it's probably more appropriate to say Disney removed him.
Right.
I don't know who the decision makers were at the end of the day. But I don't know. I've been very impressed with how James Gunn's handled the whole thing. You could very easily, there could be a backlash, and he could say, "Well, I did this years ago. This is unfair." Yada yada yada. But like you said, he came right out, and, like a pro, just said, "Yeah, I did this. If this is the consequences, I accept them." I take responsibility, I take blame, and let's move on. And I think he handled it like a pro. He handled the best way you could handle it. Does that mean there will be an eventual reconciliation? I think maybe he's laid down the groundwork for that to happen, but, who knows? And I've heard a few names thrown out there as people who could succeed him on Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that's a tough road to hoe. I mean, the guy basically, is linked forever with this franchise and these characters. The only name I've heard that interested me was, I don't know if you guys have heard of Nicole Perlman, who was the original writer of the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the ideas that eventually would come to light, James Gunn basically came in and, helped steer a lot of her ideas to light. So, I don't know, I'd want to see Guardians in the hands of someone like that. But at the end of the day, it's hugely disappointing. And the motivation of some of the people who took him down obviously is disheartening, to say the least. So it's not a happy situation by any means.
Totally agree. I think that's pretty much a perfect take on it. I completely I deal with a public university's social media account pretty regularly, so I can 100% see where Disney's decision making came from on this. On the flip side, I also think that it's Gunn has handled it very well, and I think it's a situation that maybe isn't consistent with some of the other handlings of these situations, but at the end of the day, I can't blame Marvel for doing what they did, or DC, or Disney rather. DC, God, listen to me. My brain's all scattered. Also, Guardians is going to be, I think, of all the Marvel movies, maybe the hardest to replace the director and writer on, because it feels like this is so much of a personal project for Gunn. And it feels like he has a stronger personal connection to the cast than a lot of the other directors do. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I know Nick has his wishes and wants on it.
Yeah, if you were gonna, if I were gonna fantasy cast the next director, how about Taika Waititi? Since it seems like that's really what he wanted to do in the first place, was make a Guardians movie. But that's neither here nor there. I will say this on the situation. I think it is possible to understand the decision while also wishing the decision hadn't been made, while also not endorsing the jokes that James Gunn made. The jokes that James Gunn made were offensive and in poor taste, and to be honest, not all that dissimilar from jokes I've made in my own personal life. So, it's one of those things where I understand why he had to be removed. I just hate the reasoning, the way it came about, and the fallout from it is just so... It's disappointing, is what it is. So here's hoping that, as Ben said, the groundwork has been laid for some sort of eventual reconciliation, because what we have to remember here is there was talk that he wasn't just in the act of writing and preparing to direct Guardians 3. He was apparently going to sit alongside Kevin Feige and kind of help to oversee an entire line of cosmic Marvel films. And I wonder what happens to those plans, at least in the short term, with this departure of his.
Do you guys think there's a chance that any of the cast members walk away?
I would think they're probably locked into deals, so walking away probably becomes more complicated than they would like it to be. I would think, even if they wanted to, and I honestly can't answer that question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see anyone walking away from this. Let me put it this way: I don't see Sean Gunn walking away from the movie, and that's his brother.
His brother, yep.
Yeah. So also,
I think
tremendous performer on Gilmore Girls. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, I could see. I'm guessing, Greg, you're about to say something about Batista.
Yeah, his tweets were definitely the strongest on it.
I could see him being kind of, the most hot-headed of the group and wanting to take a stand. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I feel like cooler heads will prevail, and I don't think anyone's going to walk away from the franchise. Yeah,
I don't either. His most recent tweet on it, one of the things he says in it is, what will you do when the cyber Nazis attack you? Who will stand by you? Who will cowardly distance themselves from you? Pretty strong words. So
from a strong man.
From a strong man, yes.
Captain
Who we'd love to have on the show. Big Dave, if you're out there listening, come on to the HTF show. We'll let you speak your mind. That'll never happen. But nonetheless, we did have another Marvel story that came out over the last week or so, and that is that one of the most iconic titles, and a special title to you and me both, Ben, Uncanny X-Men is returning. We are finally getting another installment of the classic Marvel's Merry Mutants series, an all-new volume of Uncanny X-Men, which ended back in May 2017. This announcement is, I've been kind of checked out of the X universe for a long time, but it just feels like there should always be an Uncanny X-Men title to me. Am I nuts?
No, not nuts at all. It's a formative title for so many of us who got into comics. It is the X-Men title. Now, they revealed very few details about this. I mean, they showed the logo, they said the name, and they're like, Uncanny X-Men will be back in the fall. What my hopes are is that with everything going on in the larger business sphere, whether Fox is being acquired by Disney, whatever, I just want to see a recommitment to the X-Men as a central part of the Marvel Universe. I want to see the best characters, the best creators, all the best on this franchise because it is and should be one of the flagship franchises of the Marvel Universe. They have some great editors working on X-Men right now. A friend of mine named Jordan White is the lead editor on X-Men. This guy knows and loves these characters more than just about anybody. So it is my hope fervently that I think we've had some decent X-Men stories the last few years with X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue. I think they were a cut above what we had right before that, but I think they can do better. And I think there's still potential to move the X-Men back to the point where they're right up there alongside Avengers as one of the core team concepts of Marvel. And so I hope that this commitment to Uncanny X-Men, number one, I'd love to see the original numbering back. Mm-hmm. I don't know where they would be, but, whatever. That's just like screaming out into space because I know it's never going to happen. But I would love to see Uncanny X-Men back, assuming it's thrown as one of the most important titles in comics.
Yeah, I want to see it be just as important as Avengers, or I could argue when I was a kid, more important than Avengers.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But just to that same level, and yet different. To have its own identity, that it's not Avengers light, which I think X-Men has come off as in recent years at times. I think the mingling of the teams diluted the brand a little bit. I think there's a lot of things that we could point to, but like you, I hope it gets back to the strength of these characters, understanding what made them work, and maybe embracing the differences of these characters as opposed to kind of homogenizing them a little bit. So looking forward to a new commitment to the X-Men going forward. And Nick, I know you've got a lot of deep thoughts on the X-Men.
Yeah. You guys summed it up. The X-Men are not my place of expertise. They are not the thing that they mean to you guys, being so well versed in the golden age of the X-Men, in the late 80s and early 90s. So, I'm glad to see that this classic title is coming back, and I'm kind of like Ben. The only thing I really want out of it, because I'm not attached to the X-Men, I would love to see the industry as a whole re-embrace traditional numbering and stop thinking that every 6 months everything needs a new number one, because it's just annoying.
Please.
So,
Isn't it amazing that and Ben, you can speak to this as well. When I was a kid, I would pick up like Batman 425, and I would have no problem just accepting that this book had been going on for 425 issues and just go on from there.
No, it was always cool to me. I loved the fact that there was 424 issues that I could buy to catch up to where I would get to. I thought that was definitely a strength. Just one last thought on the X-Men before we move off of them. In the early 2000s, I remember that the X-Men, and this will tie into another announcement we're talking about in a sec, but the X-Men were so important to Marvel that when Grant Morrison, who was probably the highest profile creator to come over to Marvel in some time, he was put on the X-Men. And then when Grant Morrison left, it wasn't a matter of, oh, well, just give the X-Men to whoever we have lying around. It was, no, we have to keep the X-Men strong. We're going to give it to Joss Whedon. Like, there was a commitment to putting the biggest names on X-Men because X-Men was the place where you could really experiment and do the most interesting stuff. I would like to see a return to that. I don't want it to just be, no offense to the current crop of writers at Marvel, but I want to see someone come in with a big new idea and do something groundbreaking with X-Men. I don't want to just see a retread. I don't want to see another Sentinel story. I don't want to see another Dark Phoenix saga. I want to see something new, something exciting. What's always made the X-Men work is when they're on the cutting edge of comics, and I want to see a return to that.
Right, for better or worse, whether people liked it or didn't like it.
I hated the Morrison stuff, and I only years later came to really appreciate how bold it was.
It was going in, and it was
so different.
It was blazing new ground for better or worse, and we really haven't seen that with the X-Men since. Even Joss Whedon, as great as his run was, it was more a run built on nostalgia, I think.
Right, it was the greatest hits.
Yeah. So that's a great thought, Ben. Well, let's move on to Image, as there have been actually quite a few of these announcements coming out of Image lately, but one that I think is the most extreme announcement to happen is that Saga, which very well could be outside of The Walking Dead, the most well-known current Image comic, is about to have a year-long intermission, as they're calling it, after this week's number 54. Brian K. Vaughan explained that he and Fiona Staples made this decision to take an extended break before coming back together for Saga 55, and they're going to pause publication for at least the next year. Now, in a vacuum, this is, hey, they just needed a break. But when you look at it, there are actually several Image titles that are going through a lot of these delays. I mean, I know that my buddies that collect Southern Bastards, they're lucky to get 3 issues a year at this point, I think. So I bring that up to say, A, what does this mean for Saga and its readership? Or do you think the readership of Saga is primarily in trade at this point? And B, is there something, a common theme among creators that work for Image or that are doing creator-owned stuff that maybe their impetus may not be as much on the month-to-month grind of making comics?
Saga, I think, is going to be fine. I think the fan following is such that they're going to stick with it. I think Brian K. Vaughan has conditioned his fans to kind of play the long game. It's going to be frustrating to be without it for a year, for sure, but I don't think it's going to lose its audience. I mean, I remember when Why the Last Man was coming out, he was pretty consistent on getting that out monthly, but I seem to remember Ex Machina not coming out every month, and it didn't hurt the series at all. At the end of the day, Image is where these guys and girls go to have a little bit of creative freedom, to be untethered to the monthly grind that is quote-unquote corporate comics. So, as a fan, you can't be surprised that some of this stuff is going to come to a halt, especially some of these guys who are working on a Marvel or DC gig, who are working on a movie job, who are working on a TV series, who have day jobs. At the end of the day, Image, it's their passion project, but it's probably not where they're making their living. So priority-wise, I think it just falls to the wayside. But honestly, it's been like that since the beginning of Image. Image has been around since the 90s, and it has, for whatever, it's evolved and gone through different iterations and had different mission statements. But the common theme at the end of the day is that the books have always been a little bit inconsistent in terms of shipping, and you kind of get what you are. These guys, whether it's going back to Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane, taking forever to put their books out back in the 90s, to what you said today with Southern Bastards and the like coming out kind of whenever is convenient. I think it's kind of built into the Image legacy. I think back to when they tried to do that Image United book to celebrate their anniversary, and I think we're still waiting on the last issue of that. So, that's it's kind of tied to Image as a company.
Yeah, and I think to their credit, Image does trade paperbacks better than Marvel and DC do.
Absolutely.
And I think that they have really carved out that niche where they know how to cater to college-age people that read books differently than the traditional comic book audience, maybe. And they have really learned to get into the bookstores and to get them out quickly, to get them out, most importantly, affordably. And I think that's how I consume my Image books.
Yeah, I think you hit on a great point there. Because the trade paperback model is so strong with Image, and because I feel like, I don't have the numbers in front of me to back this up, but it just feels like the trade readers make up a larger percentage of Image's readership than they do for Marvel or DC. I don't know why it feels that way to me. Just being in the shops every week, it seems to be that way. So I don't think this is as big of a deal, even though you do always hate to feel like you're losing even a little bit of momentum by being gone for a year. But like Ben said, I think Saga's readership is so entrenched at this point, I don't anticipate this having much of an impact in that regard, and could arguably be a good thing for the book if these two, if Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, get away for a little while, clear their heads, and come back. They may come back creatively recharged and ready to kick ass on the book all over again. So, tough to say if this is going to have any real negative impact, but we'll see a year from now, I guess.
Yes, and I'm going to mix up our format just a little bit because there's a natural transition in there. Mm-hmm. Ben was talking about the classic era of Image. One of the guys associated with that era of comics in general, Marvel, Image, Mark Silvestri. He is making a return to mainstream superhero comics as he is working on writing and drawing a Batman-Joker Deadly Duo team-up book. This was announced at Comic-Con. Silvestri's writing, drawing, and inking. It's expected to run for 7 issues. He describes it as the worst team-up ever. Joker is loving it, but Batman hates it. I know, Nick, that Silvestri was kind of gone from the public eye largely by the time you started getting into comics, but he's one of those guys that was very much right in the conversation with your Jim Lees and your Rob Liefelds and your Todd McFarlanes. And in fact, I think, Ben, you might be able to help me with the timeline here. I believe he was drawing Uncanny right before Jim Lee came on. Is that correct, or was it after?
That is correct. Mark Silvestri preceded Jim Lee on Uncanny X-Men, and then when Jim took over Uncanny X-Men, Mark Silvestri moved over to Wolverine.
That's right.
He had a pretty impactful run there as well.
Yeah, and I actually have the Claremont and Jim Lee X-Men Omnibus, the first volume, and the early issues, probably like the first, 4 or 5 issues in there are Silvestri drawn, and they're excellent. He had a very unique style, and I don't know, I think it's kind of cool to see him returning to comics, even if it is on Batman instead of the X-Men.
I'm not excited about this at all. Here's why.
Interesting.
I have a lot of respect for Mark Silvestri. Like you said, he was a formative X-Men artist. Before Jim Lee came along, he brought a style to the book that was unique, and it was vibrant, and it was colorful, and it was everything you wanted it to be. There's a lot of energy to that early Silvestri work. And actually, honestly, I don't know if you remember this, Greg, but he came back to X-Men sometime around 2004 or so to draw the final arc of Grant Morrison's X-Men, the thing we were just talking about before.
That's right. Yeah.
And he did a great job there too. The reason I'm not excited for this project is Mark Silvestri as an artist, fantastic, generational guy. Mark Silvestri as a writer, not really a proven track record of hits. I
don't think I've ever read anything by him that was written by him.
I assume he wrote Cyberforce back in the 90s.
Yep.
Maybe some Witchblade. stuff that's not memorable in the least. Stuff that was beautiful because he was drawing it, but I don't think he has any real writing chops. And to me, there's so much good Batman product that is going to be available over the next few months, and we're going to talk about a bunch of them, that it's like, if you're telling me I can only spend X amount of dollars on Batman, I'm not going to spend it on a Mark Silvestri written Batman Joker team up, which it's one of those things that, like, I can tell in his mind, and again, all due respect to the guy, but in his mind it probably sounds revolutionary, but to me it's just a concept we've seen plenty of times. I don't need to see the Joker and Batman on the same side again, and man, maybe I'll look at the first cover and think it looks pretty, but Mark Silvestri's art is not enough of a draw to me to get me to want to buy this book.
It's kind of like Brian Hitch coming over to DC in that regard, in that they're taking a creator with some name value and letting him do his own thing by not just drawing but also writing, when the writing track record is a little bit unproven. So, or
look at David Finch before that.
Yeah, there you go.
Good point.
So, I don't know.
I guess cartoony anime style that kind of took over later in comics. So I guess I'm happy to see those guys get a chance to come back again, but you never know how it'll turn out. Gonna be interesting.
I'd be much more interested to see him paired with an A-list writer. Right. In the same way that I'm infinitely more interested in what Brian, since Nick used to get the comparison of Brian Hitch, I'm so much more interested in seeing what Brian Hitch does on this Hawkman book, where he's paired with a veteran writer, as opposed to Brian Hitch writing and drawing Justice League.
Right.
There's just so much more. So I don't know. It'll be a pretty book, but I don't know how much substance it'll have.
Or even by the end of his Justice League run, where he was writing it and not drawing it, which no one wanted that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's follow this with a pair of Batman announcements. We're going to package these together a little bit. We've got two Scott Snyder announcements first. He, of course, had this classic Batman run with Greg Capullo during the New 52, undoubtedly the highlight of the New 52. And they have announced that they are going to be telling their final Batman story, and it will be called Batman Last Night on Earth. It is going to be part of DC's Black Label. It'll be a 3-issue, double-sized, limited series that they say will be the last of their Batman stories. And the premise is kind of interesting. It involves the Joker's head alive in a jar. I might normally dismiss this based on that premise, but I have to say, with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, I am all in on their Batman. So this is an interesting announcement, and I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys have, because their Batman, for somebody that hasn't enjoyed Tom King's Batman run as much, I'm looking forward to seeing their Batman back in action.
Well, first of all, I'm shocked to hear that you don't like Tom King's Batman run, Greg. That's news to me. But no, I'm all in on this. I think this is a great Batman team. I've been a Greg Capullo fan since he did X-Force back in 93, 94. This guy is the man, and he always has been. And his Batman is a notch above. More so than anything, though, I love the idea of this DC Black Label. It's one of the things I think DC is doing very right. Just giving the opportunity for top creators to come in a prestige format and tell the stories they want to tell about these incredible characters. I mean, we've seen DC try to do this before. It's what All-Star was supposed to be. It was the chance for creators to come in and kind of do whatever they wanted, but the difference is they had to do it with their own characters. Here, DC is leasing out the greatest characters in comics for creators who have a big story to tell. And it's kind of cool to see Snyder and Capullo acknowledged as being big enough and important enough to tell one of these stories, and I think they deserve it. I think their Batman run was iconic, and I think they did such a tremendous job So it's cool to see them get the props and the respect to be put in this giant prestige format and be allowed to really have some air away from the regular Batman series to tell a story that obviously they're going to put a lot of emphasis on.
Yeah, I mean, Black Label's a great concept, as Ben said. For this story specifically, I'm excited about it. You know, I'm pretty much in on anything that Snyder and Capullo are going to do together, and I am hopeful that this final story will be a final offering that will be more to my liking than was their Metal series, which I've discussed my issues with numerous times before. But I'm in for this. But Greg, I think there was another Scott Snyder announcement we wanted to talk about that I'm so torn on it because on the one hand, the concept does nothing for me, and on the other hand, I think it reteams Snyder with actually, controversial opinion, his better Batman artist collaborator.
Yes, Scott Snyder and Jock, who of course famously worked together on the Black Mirror era of Detective Comics together. They are releasing a miniseries about the Batman Who Laughs, which was part of the Metal crossover event, and that will be coming out, I think, later this year. I've lost my link to that story, but I believe that comes out, the first issue, later this year. And of course, they are a great pairing as well, Snyder and Jock. Not as iconic as the Capullo run, but certainly, for me, Black Mirror is still my favorite Scott Snyder story. So I'm looking forward to these two working together.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of in the same boat as Nick. Black Mirror was great. I think these guys have a great chemistry. Jock, underrated artist, not fully appreciated, especially on Batman. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as not really being too high on the concept of Batman Who Laughs. I didn't hate Metal as much as some other people, but if these guys are going to reteen, I think I kind of want to see it be on something more iconic,
grounded.
Something more something more grounded. That's a great word for it. That said, maybe they'll surprise us. Obviously, these guys like to work together. They bring the best out of each other. Obviously, this is a character who's near and dear to Scott Snyder. Maybe he's found the artist who he thinks can make this concept work. We'll see.
And it's not the only change coming to the Batman universe either, or the only new concept coming to the Batman universe, or new creator even. We've got Peter Tomasi joining the Batman family as he takes over Detective Comics alongside artist Doug Mahnke to build towards Detective Comics number 1000. They'll take over at 994. And Tomasi apparently had a brief run on Detective in 2016 that I don't remember at all. But he's one of my favorite comic book writers, and really excited to see what he does with Batman.
When I first started in the comics industry, Pete Tomasi was editing Batman and Green Lantern. And I don't know if you guys must know this, but he was the guy who shepherded the return of Hal Jordan. He was the guy who was basically the brains behind Green Lantern Rebirth. Obviously, Jeff Johns, Ethan Van Sciver, and their collaborators carried the ball from there, but Pete was the man behind the scenes pulling the strings. I used to refer to him, he wrote a book called The Light Brigade, which was drawn by, I don't know how to say his last name. It's a guy who did a lot of Starman work. I believe his name was Peter Snedberg. But this book, Light Brigade, Pete gave to me when I went to the DC offices to talk to him about Green Lantern Rebirth. He handed me this book, and he's like, yeah, I wrote this. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I figured I'd read it kind of as a favor to Pete, just because he was a nice guy and he was a great editor. I was blown away by how good this story was. So that was my first introduction to Pete Tomasi, writer. And I used to refer to him in the Wizard offices for another 3 hours about Green Lantern Rebirth. And the selling point I gave to them was, well, let's bring Pete in on the call as well. His writing's been great. His Batman stuff has been fantastic. He did a great run on Superman. Really underrated. I think, Greg, you appreciate his run on Nightwing.
Nightwing, yeah. It's actually my all-time favorite Nightwing run.
He's great on Nightwing. This is a guy who gets how to make these characters work. He has been associated with Batman for well over a decade, and he gets into the heart of what makes Batman and his world work. Doug Mahnke is one of the best artists of all time. This is a slam dunk creative team, and honestly, if I'm Tom King and his artistic collaborators, I'm a little scared because you're going to have these guys breathing down your neck on a monthly basis, and it could be one of the better Batman teams assembled in recent history.
I'm pumped for this. I've literally never read anything by Peter Tomasi, at least in terms of an extended run, that I haven't thoroughly enjoyed. And that covers, his Green Lantern stuff, his Batman and Robin run, his recent Superman run. All that stuff, man, has just been outstanding. I'm pumped for this. And, of course, Doug Mahnke, I know him primarily from his collaboration with Jeff Johns on Green Lantern. I'm pumped for this. And while I think there is an argument, like Ben said, to be made about Tom King need to be a little nervous, I think knowing the story sensibilities that Tomasi has brought to his other stuff, this will be a more traditionally paced Batman run that will offer something to the longtime Batman fan who perhaps isn't enjoying Tom King's run. So I think it's going to kind of wind up being best of both worlds. You're going to have the Tom King stuff, and you're going to have this that appeals to a different sensibility. So that's the important thing. If you're going to have Batman and Detective, just like if you're going to have Superman and Action, make sure that the two titles are offering something different instead of being, retreading the same material over and over again.
Oh, we should also mention, as part of this, the classic Batman costume is returning. The pre-New 52 black on gray with the trunks costume is returning. Thoughts on that, real quick?
I know you love it because it's the Hush era costume, essentially.
Yeah.
I was actually very curious to hear from you guys, who obviously, as evidenced by the last few weeks, are much bigger Batman fans than anyone in the world. I wanted to hear what you guys thought about that, because for me, the Superman costume change was a big deal. I always wanted him back in the traditional costume, but for me, Batman, he's had little tweaks to his costume through the years.
Right.
It's never bothered me that they've wandered too far off the classic one. So to me, this wasn't a huge deal, but I was curious to hear what you guys thought about it.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like, it's a cool nod to, and I don't even, when you say the classic Batman costume, that can mean so many different things, because
exactly. He doesn't have one classic costume.
Yeah, because I would argue like the blue cowl from the Denny O'Neil and that era of Batman comics is just as classic as this look we're talking about here. I will just say that with 1000 coming up, I think it's cool to go back to one of the more iconic designs. I mean, not that the current costume is bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's fine. I think it, the yellow is used in an understated way that makes sense and whatnot. But I think for that milestone, it makes sense to return to something more iconic.
I agree.
The current Batman costume is by no degree what the New 52 Superman costume was. In other words.
Yeah, and I would say, while I don't dislike the current Batman costume, I have grown to like it less over time, because I've realized that Greg Capullo is kind of the only guy that draws it in a way that appeals to me. I think the belt is too bulky in most people's drawings. Like, they draw the belt as being so large. I don't like that. I don't like the purple. I've never liked the purple. And so I just think black on gray makes so much sense for that character. The trunks I could care less about. It doesn't matter at all to me with couldn't care less, I should say. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all to Batman to me. But the actual color scheme, I'm glad that they're simplifying, because I think that as we, maybe one day we'll talk about with the Flash, I think sometimes you can overthink these costumes a little bit, and they work and they last for a reason. So I'm glad to see it back. And where does that leave us? We are on the Three Jokers. The announcement of Jeff Johns picking up the threads from DC Rebirth, also at Black Label, but in DCU continuity, which I thought was interesting. This is going to be Jeff Johns alongside Jason Fabok. And you'll have to help us if we're pronouncing his name wrong, Ben.
Oh, no, man. I remember I worked at Marvel.
That's
never
true.
Had Jason Fabok. I never had the pleasure.
So he's a great artist. I loved his work with Johns on Justice League. And they are going to be working on the Three Jokers title And John says that it focuses on Bruce, Barbara, and Jason, and explores a new facet of who Bruce Wayne is that's never been seen in comics. It connects him to the Joker in a way that will change their relationship forever. Which, of course, everybody says everything will change everything forever in comics. Yeah. But I have a lot of faith in Jeff Johns, obviously. He's my favorite writer. Fabok's an amazing artist. And I can't wait for this series to happen. I was a little surprised to hear it announced at this point because Johns has so many irons in the fire right now.
Yeah, I think this is we start to see the benefits of Jeff Johns stepping away from his more executive role to get back into the creative game. Is we see the guy who, once upon a time was writing Flash and JSA and Green Lantern and a million other things all at the same time. He's certainly capable of doing it. And not much to add to what you said, Greg. This is one of the best to ever do it in terms of writing comics, reteaming up with incredible young talent on an endlessly fascinating character or group of characters with a new spin being put on them. So as far as new projects go, I don't think it's going to get much better than this.
Yeah, I got to be honest. The whole Three Jokers idea is one that I'm not necessarily in love with. But if there's going to be anybody on the face of the planet I'm going to have faith in to execute it well, it's Jeff Johns. I mean, Greg, you and I have made no secret of the fact he's our favorite comic book writer going today. And reteaming with Jason Fabok after the outstanding Justice League run, expectations are super high. And like Ben alluded to, it's just so cool to see Jeff getting back into a more creative mode between this and various other projects that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
And probably the most iconic Jeff Johns run in comics, certainly to Nick and I at least, is his Green Lantern run. And what we've seen in the last few years is Robert Venditti took over Green Lantern, and after some bumps in the road, had a really nice run on it. And so what we're seeing now is a new announcement for a new team taking over a brand new volume of Green Lantern, which carries with it a lot of weight, a lot of ramifications. But we are getting the incredibly popular writer Grant Morrison being paired with a guy that has actually appeared on Place to Be Nation Pop on Sellers Point's podcast. Great episode that people should seek out in the archives, and that is artist Liam Sharp. And they are going to be relaunching Green Lantern as a police procedural focusing on Hal Jordan's life as a space cop. And according to Morrison, instead of big, epic 12-part stories, it's going to be focused on Hal's everyday life, the concept of him as a space cop that patrols a sector of the universe where anything can happen. Nick, I know that you've got thoughts, so I'm going to let you go first on this topic.
You're trying to bait me is what you're trying to do. I am as torn about this as I could possibly be when it comes to a comics announcement from Comic-Con. On the one hand, Green Lantern, a concept that I know and love and want to see be promoted and treated like an A-list property, is being given an A-list creative team and a relaunch that's going to feature Hal Jordan as the lead character. Exciting. Liam Sharp, one of an artist that I was heretofore pretty much unfamiliar with prior to his wonderful Wonder Woman collaboration with Greg Rucka for DC Rebirth. Glad to see him getting a big A-list assignment. We're high on it. I hate it. I think it's one of the worst Batman runs I've ever read. I think it misses so much of what draws me to that character. And to be honest, after reading, I believe it was a CBR piece that revealed this, where there are direct quotes saying, we're going to be looking at the idea of if Hal Jordan is actually a good guy. Dudes, we did this for 15 years with Jeff Johns, and the answer was overwhelmingly, yes, he's a good person, he's redeemed, we've moved past all that, and I don't have faith in Grant Morrison as a writer to explore that in any new dynamic that is going to make me want to question Hal Jordan's dedication to being a hero again. I'm sorry, it just isn't.
It's going to be interesting to see which Grant Morrison shows up to write Green Lantern. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be the guy who wrote one of the best Superman stories of all time, in All-Star Superman, or is it going to be the guy who wrote one of the most uninspired Superman stories of all time in his Action Comics run? Is it going to be the guy who did something really bold and daring with Multiversity, or is it going to be the guy who kind of dropped the ball with Final Crisis? Grant Morrison is about as divisive a writer as you will find in comics.
Totally.
And if you're a fan of how a character or concept has been done to this point, probably to Nick's attitude, one of the scariest things you can hear is that Grant Morrison is coming, because he does not tend to show a lot of reverence to what has come before. Sometimes he knocks it out of the park with his big concepts. I'd look no further than, when he redefined the JLA, and basically saved that franchise. But his track record, as I just illustrated, is far from perfect. And just the fact that his Green Lantern idea is, to look at this beat cop, street level view of how Hal Jordan does things. I'm interested to see where it goes, but were I more of a Green Lantern fan like you guys were, I would be very wary of where this is going, because I was an X-Men fan in 2001, and like I said, in retrospect, I think he did some pretty cool and groundbreaking stuff with X-Men. I can tell you that in 2001, I wanted him off my book, and I wanted my characters back. So it'll be interesting to track this one. Liam Sharp, great artist. He'll do some great stuff, especially kind of cut loose on a concept like Green Lantern. But
yeah, I totally get the trepidation. Everybody that listens to the show knows that Nick and I have pretty similar views on Grant Morrison. I'm not as harsh on him as Nick is, but I hated his Batman run as much as Nick did. And it at the same time, and I am the same way about trepidation regarding Morrison approaching my favorite characters. I was that way about Action Comics, even though All-Star Superman was so good. Right. And I was proven right in that regard. But I will say, I've always thought this since the first time I read a Grant Morrison story when I was, probably in my comic book hiatus in high school. I probably started reading his new X-Men and at the library where I lived. And I've always thought if there was a concept in comics that was made for Grant Morrison, that it was Green Lantern.
Yeah, I might agree with you.
I mean, to me, what drew me to Green Lantern when Jeff Johns was writing it was the big ideas, the just how weird you can get with it. Think back to Alan Moore's classic stories with F. Sharp Bell and things like that. Just the weirdest concepts you can come up with. And Morrison is the weirdest writer that there is in comics. So as I understand the trepidation, I share it, but I'm also kind of a little bit excited to see maybe him go off and do some different things. And for better or worse, as great as Robert Venditti's run has been, his comeback run in the Rebirth was really good, in our opinion, because it was replicating a lot of what Jeff did in his run.
Yeah.
I think Morrison's going to do something way different, but I think it could also lead to something really memorable. So I'm hoping, I'm hopeful, but also cautious. So
cautious optimism.
Well,
there we go.
Rest assured, Greg, if you don't wind up enjoying it, we'll know that there's only one reason for that, and that reason is you just didn't get it.
Yes.
The old familiar refrain.
Yep, of the Grant Morrison fan.
Well, another writer was announced for a favorite title of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys over Comic-Con, and that is that Kelly Sue DeConnick is coming over from Marvel to take over as the writer of Aquaman, or, as some who have listened to the show know, Aquaman and his noble seahorse. So she is taking over for Dan Abnett alongside artist Robson Roca. This is a really powerhouse creative team, even if the pitch of sort of an Aquaman version of Year One, where he is stranded with amnesia, doesn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, I'm like you with the pitch. Like, not a ton there, But granted, it's a very basic pitch. There may be more to it than we really know about. I gotta be honest, Kelly Sue DeConnick I know is a big get for DC, at least in terms of the profile she's enjoyed in recent years, but I've not actually read a ton of her stuff, so I can't comment on how I feel about her sensibility as an Aquaman. I will say I think Dan Abnett has done an amazing job with that character since taking it over, and I am sad to see him go, but the idea that DC went out and got somebody from Marvel, got a big-name writer in the vein of Kelly Sue DeConnick, and is putting them on Aquaman, I think speaks very well to the way that character is now being viewed by DC and the potential they think that character has, what with the movie, as we'll discuss here in a little bit, coming out.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird fit that I kind of love it. Kelly Sue DeConnick, best known for working on Captain Marvel over at Marvel, and really understanding. I mean, she was a driving force behind revamping that character and making her an A-list character. She was, behind the transition of Carol Danvers from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel, A-list superhero.
Arguably, the main reason for that character's popularity today, I think.
I would agree. I think she was one of the driving forces, and that was a great job. I actually was a Kelly Sue DeConnick fan from a lesser known book she did. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Osborne limited series she did with Emma Rios. Well worth a read. Really great take on Norman Osborn. One of the writers who really understood how to make Norman this unbalanced, psychotic, while at the same time allowing you to take him seriously and not turn him into a joke. She did a really good job on that. My point being, Kelly Sue DeConnick's a good writer. Aquaman is an interesting character. I, unlike you guys, have not read the Abnett run. I've heard good things about it, but I just think, like Nick said, the idea that DC is going to take a Kelly Sue DeConnick, a big name, someone who does have some cachet, and attach her to Aquaman, which is the last book I would have associated her with, intrigues me. Because it makes me think she has something to say about this character. And it makes me think she has an agenda, because Kelly Sue does not just come onto books and kind of write the status quo. She tends to unsettle them. She tends to have big, outsized ideas and a vision for these characters. So I'll echo you guys that the initial pitch, the Amnesia in the year one, does not grab me as something groundbreaking, but I have faith in Kelly Sue that she must have something big planned, and I think she'll take a big swing. I don't know if it'll connect or not, but I think she'll definitely take a big swing.
I think it also speaks to DC's commitment to Aquaman as a top tier character. I mean, ever since Jeff Johns revamped him, they've kind of doubled down on promoting him. So, and I think this is certainly an A-list talent being added on. So we'll see how it develops. But as if that weren't enough for the King of the Seven Seas, we're about to get into the movie portion of our SDCC coverage here by talking about the long-awaited release of the trailer for James Wan's Aquaman, which dropped over the weekend. That movie is set to come out this December, and I gotta say, I think overall the reaction to this trailer has been mostly positive. I wasn't blown away by it, but I was impressed. And I think the look of Atlantis is the most exciting thing about it. It doesn't look anything like any of the other DC movies that have been made to this point, which I think is a good thing. The aesthetic, the tone look different. I think Momoa looks charismatic, and I think the set pieces look really good. There's a few things that need to be cleaned up probably, and it wasn't, it was kind of what I was expecting it to be in terms of the story and everything, but overall, I gotta say, a mostly positive impression on me.
Yeah, I mirror your sentiments, Greg. I think it's a beautiful looking movie, which is something that we desperately need from the DC Cinematic Universe. They don't call it the DC Cinematic Universe, do they? What do they call it?
It's like the DC Extended Universe.
Now it is
it's something else, right?
Worlds of DC.
Worlds of DC, yes. The Worlds of DC desperately
sounds like a John Byrne series from the 80s.
Right? Yeah, no, it needed a movie that looked this good aesthetically, that looked this slick, that had a sense of wonder, a sense of awe. Like, transport me to a world that I've never been to. And how difficult is that to do, considering all the, not just superhero movies, but sci-fi fantasy movies that have been made and made so well over the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. The fact that Aquaman has a unique look, to me, already puts it leagues above some of the other DC cinematic efforts. And it just, I got, from the trailer, I don't think we got a full look into what the movie's going to be about. They teased just enough, which was great. Mm-hmm. But I did get a sense that this is going to be, along with the other DC movie I know we're going to discuss, this is going to be more about escapism and about creating characters who you want to go and have a good time with. I think Jason Momoa has tremendous charisma, as you said. Why not put that to advantage? I think some of the other characters are just like, there's something to this that's going to make it work, and I think it's not mired down in the how badass can we be that has afflicted some other DC movies. It more seems like, hey, let's go and have a good time, as opposed to, let's kind of try to show how gritty and dark we can be. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm like you, Greg. I liked the trailer. I didn't love it. I think visually, at least in terms of color palette and set designs and things like that, it's on the right track. It is going to show us something we haven't really seen before. I think there's some cleanup work that needs to be done on the CGI, but that could be said about virtually every big-budget movie trailer that releases months in advance ever. I mean, look back, the classic example we always point to is, look at the Super Bowl spot for Iron Man, and compare the CGI that we got in that to what we got a few months later with the finished product. So, minor concern there. But yeah, it looks like it's got all the elements. It's got, we get shots of Mira, who looks outstanding. We get shots of Aquaman himself, Ocean Master. The only part of it that concerns me, the slightest bit, is there's a glimpse in the trailer of Black Manta. Actually,
he looks awesome.
He looks awesome. I am not speaking on the design of Black Manta looking like a concern to me. My only concern is it becomes a Green Lantern-like situation, where they spend the whole movie focusing on Ocean Master as the main villain, and then kind of shoehorn in this Black Manta post-credit scene or something like that doesn't really fit. I want the Black Manta story to get the proper amount of build. I don't want it to feel like it's being burned through too quickly. I don't want them to combine them both into one movie, but at the same time, I understand you may only get one crack at the egg, so to speak, and you may not want to hold off Black Manta for a sequel in case this movie doesn't do well. So I'm of two minds about it. I understand that. I just want to see Black Manta given his full due and not have to share half of a movie, with Ocean Master or whatever.
So I think both of us would agree from our recent years' exposure to Aquaman, and we've been much more getting into the mythos. Black Manta is by far the most interesting villain.
Yes, by far.
Yeah. One other thing I want to say before we leave Aquaman is, this is as high a compliment as I can give, but when I saw what they were doing with Atlantis, it made me think of what Marvel did with Wakanda. And I don't think I can pay a higher compliment than that. Just in the sense that before I ever saw any lines spoken about Black Panther, I was blown away by what a beautiful, visually unique movie that was going to be. It could have, the acting and everything else could have been atrocious, and it still would have been one damn good-looking movie. Yeah. And I get the same sense with Aquaman in terms of them bringing Atlantis to life.
We saw freaking seahorses lined up for battle. I mean, that's pretty incredible to think about.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, speaking of impressive, let's move on to what I thought was the show stealer of Comic-Con this weekend, of everything. And that was the premiere of the trailer for Shazam, which opens next February, I believe. And this took me by storm because I have had, Nick and I have both been very trepidatious about the Shazam movie, didn't have much faith in it. Honestly, we don't have much faith in DC to do anything right from a film's perspective.
Nor have they given you any.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like we're coming at this from like some I mean, it is a cynical point of view, but it's earned cynicism in this regard.
Yeah, no, you guys have been burned way too many times. I understand your attitude. Look, the DC movie world, what the fuck world of DC? It's gotten off to a rocky start. They have tried to run before they could freaking crawl. Justice League, here's something for you. I am about as big a comic book fan as you will find. I have not seen Justice League, and it has not been a priority for me to try to rectify that. That's ridiculous.
You're not missing anything, honestly.
I know I'm not missing anything, but it's just the fact that as a lifelong comic book fan who loves DC and loves these characters, the fact that I'm not, just destroyed by the fact that I haven't seen the Justice League movie, I think says a lot.
Yeah.
And I think they've tried to course correct so many times, and I think you're going to talk. What you guys are going to talk about with the Shazam trailer is there is such a sense of relief, and that okay, yes, they can do this. They know how. I hope for the next few years DC focuses on their individual characters.
Yep.
Act like Justice League never happened. Give us a good Aquaman movie. Give us a good Shazam movie. For fuck's sake, give us good Green Lantern and Flash movies. And get us excited about these characters so that when we do see them meet in the end, it's something special. It's a big deal. And, DC's running against problems in that they already have a TV universe that has done everything, basically, that they would want their movie universe to do. Like, we've already seen with Arrow and its spin-off shows a shared DC universe that's brilliant and entertaining and well-acted and well put together. It's like, what's left for DC Cinematic to do? And I think the answer is put together good movies that cut to the heart of these characters. Don't be so concerned with what everyone else is doing. You don't have to catch up to Marvel. You can't catch up to Marvel. They're 10 years ahead of you. Do your own thing. Don't try. It's the same as when any wrestling company starts off and they try so hard to be WWE-like.
Mm-hmm.
Just be your own thing and focus on what makes you work. Did you notice that Wonder Woman was a huge success? That's because you didn't worry about anything but making Wonder Woman a great movie. And I think that's what they did with Aquaman, and I think more than anything, that's what it seems like they're doing with Shazam.
Exactly, and I think... Oh, go ahead, Nick.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, and there's such an arrogance in their approach to things in the past, in terms of they didn't use Darkseid in the Justice League movie because they were so confident they'd make future Justice League movies.
Oh, yeah,
they wanted to build to him with fucking Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, whatever. I'm not going to talk about Justice League. I am going to talk about Shazam. I thought it was amazing. Mm-hmm. It's big with superheroes, which is exactly what it should be. Mm-hmm. This trailer just completely blew me away. Nick?
I absolutely agree. Like you said, you and I had just kind of, if we mentioned this on the show, Shazam on the show, or if we talked about it in our personal lives privately, we just kind of mentioned it offhand and dismissed it, because the assumption was a character like Shazam and Billy Batson was something that DC was never going to be able to pull off in a satisfactory fashion, because literally every movie they've made for the last 5 years has shown us that a tone that Shazam needs to hit was one they were not interested in hitting and seemingly incapable of hitting. So when this trailer came along and I sat down and watched it, I was blown away, because I did not expect a movie to be shown, me to see something that looks fun, lighthearted, family-friendly, and just, it looks like it nailed what this movie should be. As you said, big with superheroes. That's what the movie should be. It looks perfect in that regard. The suit, I'm still a little shaky on. I hope they modify that design a little bit as we get closer to the movie, but that's a minor nitpick. And when's the last time, leading into a DC movie, all we had were minor nitpicks? I'm pumped for this. It looks awesome. I hope this shows DC, I hope it's a big success, and shows DC that tonal difference is a good thing for your cinematic universe. I think that's the thing that the CW universe has that they didn't have in the DCEU when it was still the DCEU. Look at something. I mean, Arrow is different from The Flash, which is different from Legends of Tomorrow, which is different from Supergirl. It's all these different things that make up one universe, and yet feel distinct unto themselves, and aren't all driven by this grimdark vision. So, more Shazam, more Aquaman, less of what came before, in my opinion.
Amen.
Yep. Oh, my brother, testify.
Can I get an amen?
And the choir said.
But that being said, I gotta mention though, Greg, it's ridiculous that there are hardcore Captain Marvel fans who are not on board with this approach.
Oh my God! I've seen them around. They want a straight from the 1940s Captain Marvel adaptation. guys, how is that going to work? Just come on, like, let it go. Like, this is a cool take on the character you love. You're gonna get to see him on the big screen. You're gonna get to see all the cool little things. I just be satisfied. I'm with you, Nick.
Yeah, agreed completely. Well, speaking of angry Captain Marvel fans, speaking of Shazam, we are getting finally, after several years, we are getting the much ballyhooed launch of Jeff Johns' Shazam series, starting this November with his old JSA collaborator Dale Eaglesham. This was announced during Jeff's Spotlight panel at Comic-Con. Shazam #1 drops November 21st. Will feature the Shazam family. And, of course, previously Johns had written the Shazam backups with Gary Frank in the New 52 Justice League, which I haven't actually read those backups, believe it or not, folks. But I've heard good things from Russell, Nick, etc. So what do you guys make of Jeff returning to the Big Red Cheese?
This is a character I know that Jeff has a lot of affection for. He's written him to great effect in the past. That series you just talked about they did on Justice League, I thought did a credible job of bringing Billy Batson into a more modern context. I will say at times it was a little too dark. Billy was a little too much of a wise ass for me, and I hope that Jeff can kind of temper that a little bit. That being said, I also want to talk about the fact that Dale Eaglesham is one of the most underrated artists in all of comics. Mm-hmm. Tremendous talent. Had a great run on JSA. Had a great run on Fantastic Four.
Secret Six.
Deserves a place at the table as one of the A-list guys, and I think he's the right guy to make Shazam an A-list series.
Yeah, I mean, I read the backups. I thoroughly enjoyed them. It's Jeff Johns doing another seemingly monthly title. Of course I'm going to read this, even if I'm not necessarily the biggest Shazam fan or Captain Marvel fan or whatever whatever term you want to use on the face of the planet. So more Jeff Johns comics equals more money out of my wallet.
Yeah,
and another chance.
I think they've legally moved it over to Shazam pretty much
across
the board.
They have, but they're, again, angry Captain Marvel fans on Twitter who will scream and yell about that nonstop.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Well, moving on from one character that Jeff Johns loves to one that he perhaps loves more than any other, and that is Stargirl. Of course, a character that Jeff Johns created in his first DC gig, I think, back in the late 90s, based on his late sister, Courtney. And we are getting, as part of the DC Universe streaming service, a live-action Stargirl series that will feature the Justice Society of America. Jeff Johns announced this during his panel. He says it's all about her bringing back the legacy of the Justice Society. And apparently this role is part of what led to his departure as Chief Creative Officer. Stargirl, now this is an interesting, another Jeff Johns confession here. As big a fan of his as I am, I've actually never read Stars and Stripe. And I've wanted to. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I've read Courtney in her other appearances, through Infinite Crisis, through JSA, through her appearances in other books, her appearances on Justice League Unlimited, the cartoon. And she's become one of my favorite characters in DC Comics. I just love this character. I love what she represents. I love her worldview and the way that the role that she serves within the DC universe. This is actually one of the biggest of all these announcements on our list. This is one of the ones that was the most exciting to me. Now, I hope that it's not what the Titans trailer was, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
God.
But I have to have faith in this because I know it's a passion project for Jeff Johns, and she is a character that I think is just a brilliant character that's I've not seen a bad version of, honestly, in other media.
Yeah, I mean, the Stars and Stripes series that Jeff wrote back when he first started writing comics, it's a little rough, which makes sense because it was literally the first thing he ever did. But at the heart of the series, it's a really good time. And to me, there are two different Jeff Johnses who show up once in a while. There's one who writes books like Justice League, writes books like, I would even say Doomsday Clock, something like that. Has kind of a dark edge to him and does more of a, really pushing the envelope type stuff. And then there's the Jeff Johns who wrote JSA and specifically who wrote Stargirl, Courtney Whitmore. And that's the guy who just loves the inherent, innocent, aw shucks goodness of the DC superheroes. And I think that's why Stargirl is so great, is because she is this earnest, honest to God, at the end of the day, good kid who just wants to do the right thing. And as far as programming that's going to be going on DC Universe, God, do I think they need this series. I think it's going to help, hopefully, just show the heroic spirit of the DC Universe and what these characters are about. I'll be very interested to see who they get to play Courtney. She was also actually on Smallville, back when Smallville was still on the air. And
yes.
They did a great job with her there, to your point of all her adaptations being good. So,
showed up briefly on Legends of Tomorrow as well.
Yeah. So I've got high hopes for this, especially with Jeff being as closely involved as he is. I can't see him letting this fail, and I think he's really going to put his all behind it. I think it's going to be something really special, and it's going to be a different take on superheroes. JSA, as written by Jeff Johns, is a different take on superheroes. It's kind of the idea of, like, this is what all superheroes should aspire to be, and just the way he writes about legacy and about doing the right thing, it's a real treat, and I hope it translates to this series.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously not read as much Stargirl as either of you guys have, but I do know that it's a deeply personal project for Jeff Johns, and as you guys have alluded to, with that level of commitment to the project, that has to come through at least somewhat in the finished product. So, with the current state of DC Universe and the other programming we know is going to be on there, I would echo Ben's thoughts that let's hope this provides something different than the other live-action show we got a glimpse at from Comic-Con. Please, dear God, be something different from that.
Yes, and we need to dig into the Johns JSA at some point in our Longbook Hunters at some point in the future, because I think it's a little bit of unexplored territory for Nick and I, so it should be fun. Moving on to DC Universe, we got a price point of $7.99 a month, I believe, Nick. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's what we heard. $7.99 a month, or you can go annually for $75 a year. So a little bit of a price cut if you go for the full year. And if you pre-order now, between now and the launch of the service, you get 3 months free tacked on. So I think it's 15 months for about $75, which comes out to $6 a month, if my math is correct.
And it always is.
How much do they pay you for that that advert?
Brother, if we were getting paid by anyone other than the wonderful folks at Blue Chew,
oh man! And let me say, I cannot say enough good things about the people and the product at Blue Chew.
At Blue Chew, there you go.
Blue Chew, yeah, no, just phenomenal.
I'm not just an advertiser. I'm a customer as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Who of us could get through our personal lives without Blue Chew?
Without Blue Chew, yep.
A wonderful question. And for any other potential advertisers out there, you can send your checks to at gphillips8652. Just send me a DM, and I'll tell you where to send your checks. So let's move on to, the price point is what it is, and we can kind of address that with talking about this next thing. So the big thing that they dropped as their big selling point for DC Universe, the trailer for the Titans series, which I would remind everyone out there is an especially important series for me because it's a live-action Dick Grayson, something we haven't gotten since 1997. So this premiered, and it's dark. It is dark. It is gritty. It is like the DCEU met Riverdale and mingled, along with maybe a Charles Bronson movie. So we get the immortal line "Fuck Batman" from Dick Grayson, which has now become a meme. And we got, most importantly to me, we got the image of Dick Grayson seemingly gunning down a bunch of criminals. I was just flabbergasted by what I saw with this trailer. It struck me wrong from the get-go. Honestly, at the beginning, I was like, you know what, this could be a good Nightwing police-type show of him kind of struggling with the guilt of not being Robin anymore or not being under Batman's wing, kind of dealing with life and all that. But then, like, as the trailer went on, I started to say, oh my God, is that Beast Boy? Is that Beast Boy snarling at the camera? Is that Dove slitting a man's throat? What in the world?
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say.
What a tremendous April Fool's joke on all of us Titans fans. This trailer, I pray to God, is... No, I mean, look, I talked to you about it on social media, Greg. To me, the concept of Dick Grayson is, no matter how dark or desperate he gets, Dick will always be the beacon of hope in the DC universe, in Batman's world, wherever he goes. He's the guy who lost his parents, endured so much tragedy, but still wants to go out there with a smile on his face and fight crime. He should be an uplifting character. Mm-hmm. I am probably one of my favorite runs in the history of comics is the Marv Wolfman, George Perez New Teen Titans. And part of the reason for that is, again, these characters who are steeped in tragedy. All the horrible things that happen to Raven, Starfire, Cyborg, Beast Boy, they all have all this trauma in their life, but they still rise above it because they have that heroic spirit. And that sense of hope, to me, has always been the central concept of Titans. To get a Titans series that basically perverts all of that and just takes a big dump on it, what a horrible joke to play on fans. And for everything we said about a step forward with Aquaman, with Shazam, with Stargirl, with all these things that are going on, this is like 10 steps backwards. There was nothing I liked about this trailer. It felt like it felt like, you know it was appropriate because teenagers are always trying to prove to their elders how cool they are by how tough and badass they can be.
Yep.
But it's all just kind of a facade and a hollow, shallow one at that. Well, in that sense, Titans has perfectly captured the teenage spirit because this feels like the most shallow, unfortunate attempt at doing something with incredible subject matter. So I don't know who's responsible for this, but I hope that they don't have too much of a footprint on the rest of what DC Universe has to offer.
I don't even know what to say about this trailer. It was so god-awfully bad that it defies logic. Like, how are you going to sit here and attempt to sell us on a dark and gritty and grounded Titan show that features freaking Beast Boy, Raven, Starfire, and Hawk and Dove? Greg, to your point, if they were going to make a police-focused Dick Grayson solo show, fine, whatever. It can have this tone. I would still think it would be inconsistent with the character. But with the entire concept of Titans, this feels so misguided from the jump. But on a larger point, if this is what they're trying to sell the DC Universe streaming service on, because we have to acknowledge, yes, they're going to be comics, but they've already said they're going to a rotational model of curated lists. So you're not going to have an extensive back catalog. You're not going to have an extensive back catalog of previous shows and animated films because they're also using a rotating model for that, even though they own the majority of the content, and a rotating model is stupid, but I've said my point on that. If the original content, is what you're selling the service with, and this is the best you have to offer, bad start for DC Universe, in my opinion. A really, really bad look.
Yeah, it's It's irredeemable. You know, the only hope here is that the show is nothing like the trailer. But I want to know how could you have watched the trailer and not anticipated backlash from it? That's what I want to know. Like when they cut this,
who greenlit this?
Yeah,
the trailer.
When you cut the trailer and you looked, how could you look at that and say, you know, I really think people are going to react well to this?
Yeah, right. Oh.
Very bizarre. Well, due to time constraints, we're going to wrap it here. We're cutting a few things out of our list, but I do want to give everyone a chance. One thing that we haven't talked about yet from Comic-Con that you wanted to bring a little bit of attention to. Ben, as the guest here, I want to let you kind of lead us off with kind of your last item you wanted to mention and your closing thoughts.
Sure. I think overall, I mean, thank God we're not ending on Titans. What a horrible way to go out that would be. On what overall was a pretty good Comic-Con. DC really brought their game with comic announcements, a few good movie trailers, some interesting stuff from other companies. I'll go out on what I thought was actually kind of flew under the radar, but it's a pretty exciting announcement from Marvel, and that's that. Under the leadership of Donny Cates, Marvel Knights is going to be coming back. And I think that's really neat. I liked Marvel Knights a lot first time around. Basically, the idea of Marvel Knights, if they keep the concept intact, is to take less appreciated Marvel characters and let people really experiment with them and see if they can come up with a take that sticks. It's how we got kind of the modern incarnations of Daredevil, Black Panther, Punisher, the Inhumans. Some of the most iconic takes on these characters emerged from the original Marvel Knights. Donny Cates is an interesting dude with a lot of big, cool ideas. And I think as far as a guy who's going to experiment and try to tap into new ideas of what makes characters work, he's a good choice. Apparently he was an intern when I was at Marvel, but I never met him. And then I met him at one of the Marvel retreats, and he's just a really smart, well-spoken dude. So I'm looking forward to see what they do with that. I think we can never have enough, you know, one of my favorite things is the idea that there's a never-ending kind of catalog of characters in the Marvel Universe, in the DC Universe, and that there are no such thing as bad characters. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the new Marvel Knights. And I could see some of the, you know, big concepts of tomorrow coming out of that factory.
Interesting note about Donny Cates. When I first started seeing his name pop up online a couple years ago, for some reason mentally, I was confusing him with Carrie Bates, the old Flash writer. So I thought
interesting if Carrie Bates was back,
and in a major position of power at Marvel Knights, no less.
Absolutely.
So Nick, anything we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to bring attention to?
Yeah, real quick, DC animated the DC animated films actually made some exciting announcements talking about their 2019 slate, because as we know, the 2-part Death and Return of Superman film is coming out, but then we're also getting a Justice League versus the Fatal 5 movie, and then most excitingly, I think for both Greg and I, 2 different announcements. One, a Wonder Woman film. Not that Greg and I are particularly excited about a Wonder Woman film, even though the first Wonder Woman animated film was outstanding and has deserved a follow-up for a long time. But, notably, this is the first non-Batman, Superman, or Justice League animated film in quite some time, which would hopefully open the door for more Green Lantern animation down the road, particularly that Sinestro Corps project we've begged for a decade now. And then, along the same lines, in terms of stories we love being adapted, the animated Hush movie is coming, which I think is an outstanding move. Can't wait for it.
I am so excited for that, Nick, but I'm also a little nervous if they put it in the current animated universe continuity. I hope that they just do it as a standalone.
Right.
But it's, as many people know, it's the story that got me back into comics, and so I'm so freaking pumped for this getting an animated treatment, especially seeing some of the reviews of the Death of Superman movie that are coming out. The one thing I want to close on, I thought the one TV trailer that blew me away was Arrow. I know I'm an Arrow homer, but holy shit, that might have been the best season trailer that they've ever put out for that show. I thought it was outstanding.
It looks really good.
Yeah, different.
Yeah, and as a Flash fan, I can't say enough how dismayed I am that American Pie 2's Chris Klein will be playing Cicada on this season of The Flash. God, I was so excited. I went on Twitter and jumped right to the link of the Flash season trailer and just watched it, and I'm like, oh, this is one of the same way you felt about the Arrow trailer. I was like, this is amazing. This is so good. And then there's a tweet right underneath it saying, Chris Klein to play Cicada. And I just...
You slam your laptop down.
Oh, the air just... Luckily, I was watching on my phone, so I just threw my phone to the ground. And, yeah, the air just came out of the room. Rollerballs, Chris Klein to play seminal Flash villain. Could not be a worse choice.
I don't know of any rollerball. I only know of rollerball.
Yeah, right? No. Rollerball featuring cameos by Paul Heyman and Shane McMahon. Classic film. But yeah, wow. What a way to close out Comic-Con with Chris Klein.
Chris Klein.
Yes, our
Chris
friend
Klein,
Jeremy
the man,
Reynolds,
the myth, the legend,
has long made the argument, since we were in college actually, he would make the argument to anyone, whether they were talking about movies or not, that, hey, did you know that Chris Klein is the worst actor working?
The worst actor in all of moviedom. I was ripping off you guys' tagline there.
Very good, very good.
Very good.
Well, Chris Klein, yes, that's a bad note to end on, but we're going to end there. Ben,
so much good stuff, guys.
Yeah.
We covered so much stuff to be excited about. Don't get stressed out about Titans and Chris Klein. They're not the headline here. There's a lot of good stuff going on in comics.
Yep.
Yes, including Cody Rhodes' long-awaited return.
Yes.
Very happy for him. So, folks, thanks for listening. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys, because, again, I know I kind of strong-armed my way on here. Thank you for having me, and we'll have to do this again in the future.
Absolutely.
No doubt. And in the meantime, next week we'll be right back here, same time, same place, with Hard Travelers for Hire, as we will be taking a look at Spider-Man Homecoming. Should be an interesting episode. Nick, any final thoughts?
No, I think Dark Knight Month has been a blast. Doing this rundown here with Ben has been a blast. And so, sad to see July go, but looking forward to what August has to offer.
In the meantime, go home, read some comics, and get ready for next week's Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
To know just how alone you really are.
What are you seeking? I seek the means to fight injustice, to turn fear against those who prey on the fearful. To conquer fear, you must become fear. To manipulate the fears in others, you must first master your own. Are you ready to begin? If you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if they can't stop you, then you become something else entirely. Legend must wait. Legend.
storm coming.
And here we go. What are you?
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
I'm sorry, Harvey.
No. No, you're not. Not yet.
Did they kill him?
I'm not sure.
You see only one end to your journey. Endure, Master Wayne.
That man has to come back.
I won't bury you. Buried enough members of the Wayne family.
I'm not afraid. I'm angry. Them, you're just a freak. I need you right now. When they don't, they'll cast you out.
Gotham isn't beyond saving. There are good people here.
You don't owe these people anymore. You've given them everything.